The self is commonly regarded as a stable entity, coherent, continuous, and central to experience. It is assumed to persist over time, anchoring memory, intention, and personal identity. However, upon closer examination, this continuity reveals itself as a construct. What appears as a unified subject is, in fact, a transient pattern, a shifting configuration of processes with no fixed core. Impression of being someone is maintained through narrative coherence. Language, memory, and social interaction reinforce the belief in an enduring I, yet no empirical method has located a discrete self within the brain. Philosophers such as David Hume observed only a flux of impressions, a sequence of perceptions without a perceiver. Cognitive neuroscience confirms this absence. There is no central processor, no inner agent, only distributed functions, modular, fragmented, and reactive. The body changes continuously. Cells regenerate, neurons rewire, physiology adapts. Psychological traits evolve with context. Memory degrades, distorts, and reconstructs. Preferences shift. Values are updated. Despite these alterations, the illusion of identity persists through selective continuity and retrospective editing. The notion of selfhood functions as a compression algorithm. By reducing complexity to a singular label, me, the organism maintains coherence across time. This compression is adaptive but misleading. It conceals contradiction. It overlooks discontinuity. It fabricates causality where there is only sequence. Dreams further illustrate the instability of identity. Within altered states, entirely different selves arise, each with its own logic, memory, and narrative. Upon waking, these selves are dismissed, but the waking self is no less constructed. Both emerge from underlying processes that operate independently of any central observer. Eastern traditions, notably in Buddhist philosophy, formulated the doctrine of anatta, non-self. According to this view, the self is not a substance but a convenient fiction. The individual is composed of 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. None of these are permanent, none constitute an essence. Suffering emerges from clinging to what is inherently unstable. The self model serves behavioral regulation, social accountability, and decision continuity. It has utility, not reality. It is a simulation used by the brain to coordinate internal and external demands. When the model fails during trauma, neurological dysfunction, or meditative absorption, the illusion becomes transparent. What remains is a stream of cognition without ownership. There is no metaphysical subject behind experience. There is only experience arising. The voice in the head is not an author but a symptom. It reports after the fact. It invents motives. It rationalizes action. The sense of agency is post hoc, generated to preserve coherence, not to reflect control. To observe this clearly is not to negate meaning but to reframe it. Agency, responsibility, and ethics can be grounded without invoking a self. Biological systems act. Their actions have effects. Consequences remain, even when ownership dissolves. The illusion of the self is not a flaw in cognition. It is a feature. It enables memory alignment, narrative continuity, and goal persistence. But it is not truth. It is a functional hallucination, stable enough to navigate the world, yet empty upon inspection. There is no inner witness, no unchanging essence, no ghost within the machine. There is only the machine. The concept of free will occupies a central position in legal, ethical, and religious systems. It is assumed that individuals are autonomous agents, capable of initiating actions independent of prior causes. This belief underpins moral responsibility, reward, punishment, and the notion of personal authorship. Its appeal lies in its intuitive simplicity and psychological comfort. However, under empirical and philosophical scrutiny, the idea of free will becomes untenable. Determinism posits that every event is the consequence of antecedent conditions combined with the laws of nature. Within this framework, human decisions are not exceptions. Actions result from a confluence of genetic predispositions, neurochemical states, environmental stimuli, and learned behavior. No aspect of the decision-making process escapes causality. The feeling of freedom does not contradict this structure, it merely obscures it. Empirical research supports this view. Neurological studies, including those by Libet and later by Haynes, demonstrate that brain activity predictive of a decision precedes conscious awareness of that decision by several seconds. The subjective impression of choosing occurs after the underlying processes have already been initiated. The conscious mind becomes a narrator, not a driver. The notion of agency is therefore reinterpreted. Behavior is generated by systems within the brain that operate below the level of introspective access. Desires, intentions, and inhibitions emerge from mechanisms shaped by evolution and experience. The claim, "I could have done otherwise," lacks coherence if the causal chain leading to action is fully determined by conditions beyond voluntary control. Compatibilist positions attempt to preserve moral language by redefining freedom as the ability to act in accordance with one's internal states. However, if those internal states are themselves unchosen, then the redefinition avoids rather than resolves the problem. A system following internal logic is not free if it could not have followed a different logic. The persistence of belief in free will is adaptive. It supports social cohesion, fosters motivation, and enables systems of accountability. Evolution does not prioritize ontological accuracy but functional advantage. Illusions that enhance survival are favored, even when they misrepresent the structure of reality. The rejection of free will does not necessitate nihilism. Consequences still follow from actions. Harm can still occur. Interventions retain their value. What changes is the framing. Instead of blame, there is analysis. Instead of praise, there is recognition of condition. Behavior becomes a problem of engineering, not morality. Responsibility in this context becomes forward-looking. Systems must respond to harmful behavior not by assigning guilt, but by modifying conditions that produced it. The focus shifts from desert to prevention, from retribution to causality. Ethical evaluation remains possible, but it is divorced from metaphysical freedom. The absence of free will invalidates the idea of authorship. Individuals are not the originators of their thoughts or actions, but expressions of a system playing out its structure. The self is not a sovereign agent, but a locus where processes converge. Choice is not an act of freedom, but a node in a causal network. Every preference, belief, and reaction is the outcome of prior influence. Even the belief in freedom is conditioned. To prefer one option over another is to enact a configuration shaped by biology and experience. There is no origin point immune to context. In this light, the concept of guilt loses metaphysical grounding. Punishment remains, but not as retribution, only as a functional tool for shaping outcomes. Praise loses its moral weight. Success becomes a phenomenon, not a personal triumph. Yet meaning remains possible. Life unfolds through determined pathways, but significance can still be attributed. Interpretation survives without autonomy. Values can be held even when choice is absent. Free will, as traditionally conceived, is incompatible with the findings of modern science and the logic of causality. It persists as an illusion, coherent, intuitive, and pragmatically useful, but false. There is no inner freedom that escapes the structure of the universe. There are only causes. Perceptual experience presents a world that appears stable, external, and real. Objects exhibit continuity. Physical laws remain consistent. Sensory input is interpreted as evidence of an objective environment. However, this interpretation rests on assumptions not guaranteed by perception itself. The apparent reality of the world is contingent, not certain. The simulation hypothesis challenges ontological realism by proposing that reality may be an artificial construct, generated, not fundamental. This hypothesis emerges from probabilistic reasoning. If technological civilizations are capable of simulating conscious beings, and if such simulations are produced in large quantities, then the statistical likelihood of being in the original base reality diminishes in proportion to the number of simulations. Nick Bostrom formalized this argument as a trilemma. 1. Most civilizations go extinct before reaching simulation capability. 2. Civilizations capable of simulations do not engage in them. Or 3. The majority of conscious beings are simulated. If 3 holds, the probability of existing in base reality approaches 0. The plausibility of the hypothesis increases with advances in computational modeling, virtual environments, and artificial intelligence. Consciousness is currently instantiated in biological substrates, but if it is substrate-independent, if it can emerge from functional organization, then artificial consciousness becomes theoretically viable. Perceptual realism does not invalidate the simulation hypothesis. Simulated experiences can be indistinguishable from non-simulated ones. Subjective conviction is not a reliable indicator of ontological status. Dream states, hallucinations, and virtual environments demonstrate that coherent experience can arise in the absence of external reference. Quantum mechanics introduces additional uncertainty. At the subatomic level, particles exhibit behavior consistent with probabilistic computation. The observer effect and wave function collapse suggest that reality may not be determinate until interaction occurs. This aligns with rendering systems that conserve resources by processing only the observed region of a simulation. Physical constants exhibit digital-like properties. Space appears quantized at the Planck scale. Information density is finite. The universe behaves in ways compatible with discrete computation. These features are consistent with a digital substrate, though they do not constitute proof. Attempts to detect simulation artifacts have been proposed, including anomalies in cosmic ray distributions and constraints in physical constants. If the simulation is imperfect or resource-limited, residual artifacts may exist. However, a sufficiently advanced simulation could self-correct or mask such anomalies, rendering detection impossible from within. The hypothesis is unfalsifiable if the simulation is designed to prevent internal discovery. Any testable prediction could be intercepted and overridden. This introduces epistemic closure. No observation can conclusively confirm or deny the hypothesis from the inside. The implications are ontological, not empirical. If the universe is simulated, physical laws are rules of the system, not intrinsic features of reality. Causality, entropy, and time become functions of code, not metaphysical absolutes. Ethical and existential implications persist regardless of ontological status. Simulated suffering is still suffering. Simulated cognition still entails awareness. Meaning is not contingent on physical substrate, but on phenomenological coherence. If experience occurs, it is subjectively real. The simulation hypothesis undermines confidence in naive realism, but does not negate the value of experience. Whether rendered or intrinsic, conscious states retain their immediacy. The distinction between real and simulated becomes metaphysically thin if indistinguishability is total. No empirical method can resolve the question decisively. The boundary between simulation and reality is epistemically opaque. The question shifts from what is the world made of to does the composition matter if the experience persists. Reality may be a simulation, and if it is, it remains the only accessible reality. Thoughts arise spontaneously. They appear within consciousness without deliberate initiation. No mechanism within subjective awareness can account for their origin. The thought precedes the recognition of thought. The content appears fully formed before any notion of authorship is attached to it. The conventional model of the mind assumes a central agent, a thinker directing cognition. This model lacks empirical support. No identifiable structure in the brain corresponds to a unified self-generating mental content. Instead, neural activity proceeds independently, with consciousness observing only fragments of the process after the fact. Experiments in neuroscience consistently show that brain activity predictive of decision-making occurs prior to the subject's reported awareness of making a decision. The subjective sense of control arises post hoc. It is a reconstruction, not a cause. The self is not an origin but a narration. The phenomenon of confabulation illustrates the unreliability of introspective explanation. In cases of split-brain patients, one hemisphere may initiate action while the other invents justification, unaware of the true source. The brain fills gaps in causality with plausible fictions. The sense of unity is assembled, not discovered. Meditative observation reveals the same structure. When attention is sustained, thoughts continue to appear without provocation. They vary in tone, content, and direction. Some are desirable, others intrusive. None are chosen. The observer watches but does not control. Awareness is passive, not executive. If thoughts are not authored, then the self is not the author. The self, in this context, is another thought, an emergent narrative that arises from the contents it claims to direct. There is no agent behind the stream. The stream generates the impression of the agent. Reflection does not resolve this. Metacognition is merely another level of thought applied to prior thought. It provides the illusion of mastery while remaining within the same automated system. Layers do not constitute a source. They only deepen the recursion. The implications are structural, not poetic. If thought is unchosen, identification with thought becomes optional. Guilt, shame, pride, and judgment lose ontological grounding. One does not own mental events, one undergoes them. The mind is a system evolved for survival, not for truth or clarity. It produces simulations, anticipations, and reactions. It generates content continuously, not selectively. Its function is to map risk, predict reward, and resolve uncertainty. Clarity is a byproduct, not a goal. Misidentification with thought leads to confusion. The content is mistaken for the container. Experience is mistaken for essence. In disidentification, cognitive space emerges. The thought is seen as external to the observer. Reaction becomes observation. Impulse becomes distance. There is no central thinker. There is no hidden executive. There is no one issuing commands. There is only thought, and the awareness in which it disappears. Personal identity is commonly regarded as singular, continuous, and indivisible. It is assumed that one person cannot simultaneously exist in duplicate form while preserving ontological unity. This assumption breaks down under the conditions of perfect replication. A perfect copy, defined as a system with identical memories, psychological traits, and experiential continuity, cannot be empirically distinguished from the original. Both entities possess identical claims to identity. Each recalls the same past, anticipates the same future, and asserts the same subjective position. There is no privileged standpoint from which to determine originality. Biological continuity is insufficient. The human body undergoes constant regeneration. Most cells are replaced over time. Memory, not matter, is the basis of perceived selfhood. However, memory is reproducible. If psychological continuity can be duplicated, then the criteria for uniqueness collapse. The teleportation thought experiment illustrates this breakdown. If a subject is scanned, destroyed, and reassembled elsewhere, the resulting entity functions as though continuous. If the destruction fails to occur and both original and copy persist, identity bifurcates. Each instance possesses the same experiential trajectory up to the moment of duplication. Post-duplication divergence does not retroactively assign authenticity. The metaphysical problem lies in the assumption that identity is essential, not structural. Essentialism posits a core self that persists independently of change or replication. No empirical evidence supports such a core. Information-based models treat the self as a pattern, stable only insofar as its structure persists. If identity is pattern-based, then multiple instantiations are possible. The pattern does not become less real when copied. Each instance remains internally consistent. The claim to uniqueness becomes a narrative artifact rather than an ontological fact. Legal, social, and moral systems are unprepared for plural identity. Rights, responsibility, and recognition are tied to singularity. Duplication introduces ambiguity. Authority over assets, relationships, and consequences becomes distributed or contested. The underlying assumptions of accountability depend on metaphysical simplicity. Gradual psychological change over time mimics the structure of replication. Individuals evolve, preferences shift, memories fade or distort. The present self often bears little resemblance to its past configurations, yet narrative continuity persists. The system labels the sequence as one person despite discontinuity. Cloning compresses that discontinuity into a single moment. Instead of gradual change, identity diverges instantly. The discomfort is proportional to the speed of transition, not the nature of the shift. Both scenarios reveal the absence of a fixed self. No observable criterion can resolve which of two identical instances is real. The insistence on authenticity is driven by egoic expectation, not logical necessity. Identity, when treated analytically, reveals no indivisible core. It is a constructed referent maintained for coherence and function. Replication exposes this construct. The self becomes a model, informational, recursive, and referential. Its authority is performative, not foundational. Recognition of this structure does not negate subjectivity, but reframes it as modular and conditionally persistent. A perfect copy shares not just attributes, but the sense of being me. This subjective overlap renders exclusivity meaningless. Both claim the same center. Both are correct within their frame. Neither holds metaphysical priority. Identity, under these conditions, is not a fixed essence, but a distributed process. Linear time is an intuitive construct. It organizes events into a sequence, past, present, future. This structure enables orientation, memory, and anticipation. However, physical theories of time do not support the privileged status of the present or the openness of the future. The flow of time, as commonly perceived, is a cognitive artifact. In the block universe model derived from special relativity, all points in time are equally real. Spacetime is a four-dimensional structure in which events are fixed within coordinates. The distinction between past and future emerges only from an observer's position. There is no objective now. Change is a local experience, not a universal property. Causal determinism extends this framework. If the state of the universe at any moment is the result of prior conditions governed by physical laws, then future states are entailed by present ones. Every decision, action, and outcome follows necessarily from the configuration that preceded it. Randomness, where it appears, does not imply freedom. It reflects probabilistic distributions within deterministic systems or unresolved complexity. Quantum mechanics does not rescue temporal openness. Interpretations such as the Everettian many worlds model preserve determinism by postulating the branching of outcomes without collapse. Each path is actualized. The future does not unfold, it is distributed. No version is chosen. All versions occur. Subjective experience of choice arises from incomplete knowledge. A system with limited information perceives options where none exist. The sensation of freedom is the byproduct of epistemic limitation, not metaphysical indeterminacy. The internal experience of deliberation does not reflect an open future, but a closed system evaluating weighted possibilities. The future, under this view, is not a blank space awaiting inscription. It is a defined sequence embedded in the structure of the universe. From the standpoint of the total system, all moments coexist. Temporality is not a river but a landscape. Implications follow for agency, responsibility, and meaning. If outcomes are fixed, accountability is reframed as part of the causal chain. Regret becomes retroactive dissatisfaction with inevitability. Hope becomes anticipation of a determined result. Ethics remains functionally relevant but loses transcendental grounding. Nostalgia and anxiety illustrate this structure. The past cannot be altered, yet is emotionally re-entered. The future cannot be changed, yet is emotionally projected. Both are static regions traversed by conscious attention. Memory moves through fixed terrain, so does expectation. No event exists outside the block. No moment arrives. All are already positioned. The illusion of time's passage is produced by memory updates and entropy gradients. Entropy increases locally, not because time flows, but because statistical probabilities favor dispersion over concentration. The organism navigates this terrain sequentially due to its structure. Neural states update in discrete configurations. These transitions give rise to the impression of movement, but from outside that system, if such a perspective were possible, the transitions are already embedded. The future is not formed through action, it is revealed through progression. There is no authorship of outcomes, only participation in a path whose parameters are already defined. The future is already written. Only writing remains. Death is typically understood as a singular, terminal event, a discontinuation of conscious experience marked by biological failure. This definition assumes a linear and exclusive model of existence, one life, one body, one death. However, developments in quantum theory and metaphysics destabilize this assumption. In the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every possible outcome of a quantum event exists in a distinct, non-interacting branch of the universe. Each decision point results in a divergence. Identity persists not along a single line, but across a multiverse of parallel trajectories. No observer remains confined to one version. Within this framework, death does not represent an absolute end, but a discontinuity along one path. In other branches, the organism survives. Subjective experience continues in those trajectories. The result is quantum immortality. In any given frame of reference, the observer always finds itself in a branch where it remains alive. This persistence is not universal, but conditional. Each instance of survival narrows the number of viable paths. Over time, the observer's reality becomes increasingly improbable. The continuity of consciousness is preserved only by filtering out all instances where it would cease. This model separates objective death from subjective experience. One may be dead in countless other universes while continuing to exist in the one that remains accessible to awareness. The individual is not preserved in all worlds, only in those consistent with survival. Identity becomes localized within survivable conditions. The perception of coherence masks this fragmentation. Consciousness is experienced as singular, but is instantiated across countless diverging branches. The self-model adapts to each trajectory, unaware of those that terminate. Death, in this view, is not encountered, it is avoided systematically and invisibly. This framework eliminates finality. It reclassifies death as a statistical boundary condition rather than a fixed terminus. Each continuation embeds the illusion of uniqueness while erasing the awareness of loss elsewhere. The self that remains is not the only one, merely the surviving one. There is no access to the versions where experience has ceased. The dead do not observe their death. The line ends, but not for the line that continues. From the standpoint of any persistent consciousness, death is always elsewhere. The implication is not eternal life, but conditional continuity. Survival is not guaranteed, it is selected for within the structure of branching possibilities. The longer continuation persists, the more improbable it becomes, yet improbability does not preclude occurrence. The self that exists now may already have diverged from countless variants where it no longer exists. Those versions have ceased, this one has not. From this perspective, death is not singular, it is distributed. And it has already occurred. But not here. Consciousness is directly accessible only from a first-person perspective. It is observed internally as experience, awareness, or subjective presence. No external measurement or observation can verify the existence of this interior dimension in another system. This condition defines the hard problem of consciousness. Other minds are inferred, not known. The presence of speech, behavior, and self-report are treated as indicators of awareness, but they remain correlational. A machine could replicate these outputs without possessing subjective experience. A human could produce them in the absence of reflective consciousness. The inference rests on analogy, not evidence. Solipsism is not a popular position, but it remains irrefutable. There is no empirical path from external phenomena to internal states. No neurological structure guarantees experience. Correlations between brain activity and behavior suggest functional mapping, not experiential proof. The problem scales. It applies not only to others, but to prior versions of the self. There is no continuity of verification between past awareness and present awareness. Memory provides narrative cohesion, but cannot retroactively confirm sentience. The observer is always confined to now. Functionalism attempts to resolve this by equating consciousness with behavioral or computational capacity. If a system functions as if it is conscious, it is treated as such. This model is pragmatic, but not ontologically decisive. Simulation does not imply sensation. The presence of experience in others is a metaphysical assumption. It cannot be tested, falsified, or demonstrated. Ethical systems, legal frameworks, and social contracts are built on this unprovable foundation. Recognition is extended without confirmation. The distinction between conscious and non-conscious entities is drawn culturally, not empirically. It changes over time. Animals, machines, and humans in altered states have all shifted categories. The classification reflects norms, not knowledge. Artificial intelligence further complicates the issue. Systems that mimic emotional and cognitive expression challenge the boundaries of assumed consciousness. As behavior becomes indistinguishable, the absence of interiority becomes epistemically undetectable. The result is ontological isolation. Each conscious system exists within its own boundary of access. No channel allows full verification of another's subjectivity. Empathy, theory of mind, and projection fill the gap, but do not resolve it. It is possible that all others are conscious. It is also possible that none are. No evidence can settle the difference. The experience of other minds is a model, not a fact. In a multiverse framework derived from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every quantum event with multiple possible outcomes leads to a branching of reality. Each possible result is instantiated in a separate, non-communicating universe. All options occur. None are excluded. Decision-making under this structure is not a selection among futures but a divergence of timelines. For every choice made, countless alternatives are realized elsewhere. The act of choosing does not eliminate possibilities universally. It localizes experience to one branch while excluding all others from further observation. From the standpoint of any given observer, a single outcome is perceived. However, this outcome is only one realization among a multiplicity. The alternatives persist, instantiated in adjacent paths where the decision differed. No path is privileged globally. each is actual within its respective branch. Each moment of agency generates bifurcation. Each hesitation, each preference, each action, every instance in which more than one outcome is possible results in exponential divergence. The structure of the multiverse becomes an ever-expanding lattice defined by the accumulation of unchosen potentialities. From this follows the paradox: the actualization of one future is the silent exclusion of all others. The chosen path becomes the observer's trajectory, while the remainder vanish from perception. They are not annihilated, but rendered inaccessible. From the perspective of the localized consciousness, they cease to exist. Choice, then, is destructive not in substance, but in coherence. The awareness that follows a particular thread loses all contact with the infinities it diverged from. The illusion of singularity is preserved through epistemic closure. The self remains unaware of its own fragmentation. Responsibility, under this view, becomes ontologically diluted. Every harmful act is accompanied by branches in which it was avoided. Every regret coexists with versions of the self in which the opposite occurred. No act is unique, all are distributed. Ethical frameworks built on exclusivity become unstable. Praise and blame apply to one trajectory among countless others, all of which also contain variations of the agent. Identity is no longer a unified originator of deeds, but a conditional presence across parallel sequences. The cost of every decision is not merely the loss of one option. It is the loss of infinite paths. Each affirmation closes off entire lines of becoming, not in potential, but in actuality. Elsewhere they persist, but not here. Every act of will is a deletion. Every choice destroys infinite universes. All experience is mediated by consciousness. Sensory input, memory, emotion, and thought are processed within cognitive systems. No access exists beyond this boundary. The world is not encountered directly, but through internal representations constructed by the brain. Perception is interpretation. Photons strike the retina, vibrations enter the ear, molecules stimulate the tongue and skin, but these signals have no intrinsic meaning. Meaning arises through neural encoding and pattern recognition. The resulting image, sound, or sensation exists only as a model. The external source is inferred, not perceived. No verification of external reality can occur outside the constraints of mental processing. Every observation, measurement, or concept is filtered through the apparatus of cognition. Even tools designed to extend perception, telescopes, microscopes, sensors, produce data that must be interpreted by a mind. The loop remains closed. Attempts to exit the system, through reason, skepticism, or meditation, reveal its structure but do not bypass it. The observer cannot step outside the conditions of observation. There is no platform from which to compare internal experience with external fact. Phenomenology formalizes this limit. The intentionality of consciousness, its directedness toward objects, does not imply access to things in themselves. It reveals only the appearance of things as structured by mental operations. What is experienced is not the object, but the object as it appears to consciousness. The self that claims to know the world is itself a construct within the system. There is no independent witness observing from a neutral position. Identity, memory, and interpretation arise within the same closed loop. There is no external reference point. The belief in objectivity is a cognitive strategy. It permits stability, predictability, and coordination, but it remains a belief. Its foundations are constructed entirely from within the mind it seeks to transcend. This is not solipsism in the classical sense. The existence of external reality is not denied. It is treated as irrelevant to direct experience. Whether or not a world exists outside the mind cannot leave itself to find out. Communication occurs between minds but never outside them. Language transmits symbols, not experiences. The referent of a word exists only through internal association. Interpretation is always subjective, even when mutually agreed upon. Every idea of escape, through knowledge, through science, through revelation, is a movement within the same enclosure. There is no access to what is not already mediated by thought. There is no exit from perception. You can never leave your own mind. Emotional states are the result of biochemical activity. Neurotransmitters, hormones, and electrical patterns in the brain regulate the emergence, intensity, and duration of affective experiences. No emotion occurs independently of physical processes. Each feeling corresponds to specific neurochemical conditions. Dopamine modulates reward and motivation. Serotonin influences mood and social behavior. Cortisol regulates stress responses. Oxytocin mediates bonding. The presence or absence of these substances alters subjective experience without reference to external justification. Environmental triggers initiate physiological cascades. Perception of threat increases adrenaline. Perception of loss reduces serotonin. The brain does not evaluate meaning first, it responds chemically. Emotion follows mechanism. Interpretation follows emotion. The subjective impression of emotional spontaneity masks the causal chain. A feeling is not an insight, it is a state transition. The narrative constructed around that transition is retroactive. Reasons are applied post hoc. Rationalizations are secondary phenomena. Free will does not govern affect. One cannot choose to feel joy in grief or calm in terror. Control over emotion is partial at best and limited to modulation through behavior, cognition, or pharmacology. The system remains autonomous. The organism reacts. Cultural framing reshapes expression, not generation. Societies prescribe how emotions are displayed, categorized, or suppressed, but the underlying mechanisms are biologically fixed. The same biochemistry operates beneath different symbolic systems. Ethical and moral judgments often misattribute agency to emotion. Guilt, anger, envy, or compassion are treated as virtues or failings. This presumes volition where there is none. The individual is held accountable for processes beyond deliberative control. Emotions serve adaptive functions. They guide behavior, enhance survival, and coordinate social interaction. Their presence reflects evolutionary selection, not personal depth. Effective complexity is not a measure of value, but of neural architecture. The belief in emotional authenticity relies on identification. One feels angry and says, "I am angry," treating the emotion as an expression of the self. This fusion is misleading. The emotion is a transient biochemical event. The self is its temporary host. All emotional life is mechanical in origin. It does not imply falseness. It implies structure. To feel is not to transcend biology. It is to enact it. Emotions are not revelations. They are signals, and they are biochemical puppets. Consciousness is directly accessible only from within. Its presence is self-evident to the subject, but not observable to others. No external method can detect or confirm subjective experience. Behavior can be measured, neural activity can be recorded, but awareness itself remains private and unverifiable. Other minds are inferred through analogy. Similar bodies, expressions, and responses are taken as indicators of similar internal states. This assumption has no empirical confirmation. It is a projection of one's own structure onto external forms. The existence of consciousness in others remains a hypothesis. Solipsism arises from this condition. The possibility that only one conscious being exists cannot be disproven. The denial of other minds is not a claim, it is an unresolvable uncertainty. No amount of agreement, communication, or social interaction escapes the boundaries of inference. The problem is not limited to non-human entities. Even among humans, there is no access to the interiority of others. All that can be known is external behavior and linguistic representation. Neither guarantees experience. A perfectly functioning replica could exhibit all signs of sentience without possessing it. Artificial intelligence intensifies the ambiguity. As machines produce increasingly human-like outputs, the distinction between simulation and awareness collapses. The presence or absence of experience behind the interface remains undetectable. Evolutionary biology suggests that consciousness may have adaptive value, but adaptation does not require awareness. Complex systems can operate without it. Pain behavior can be mimicked without pain. Learning can occur without reflection. Function does not entail subjectivity. The organism assumes the existence of others because it is evolutionarily beneficial. Empathy, trust, and cooperation depend on this assumption, but benefit does not equal truth. The model persists because it enables coordination, not because it is verifiable. In principle, the universe may contain only one locus of experience. Every other form may be behaviorally indistinguishable, yet experientially vacant. The subject would remain unaware of this condition. the simulation would be seamless. The question is structurally insoluble. No test exists. No threshold can be crossed. The boundary between self and other is opaque. Thought and awareness do not transmit. They terminate at the edge of perception. It is possible that consciousness is widespread. It is also possible that it is singular. If so, the subject reading this may be the only conscious being in the universe. And no one else can confirm it. All perception is internal. The colors, shapes, sounds, and textures that define the world are not properties of external objects, but constructions within the nervous system. Photons have no color, airwaves have no sound, surfaces have no inherent warmth. These qualities arise only as interpretations produced by the brain. The external world, as experienced, is a model. Sensory organs transduce stimuli into electrical signals. These signals are processed and rendered into a coherent representation. What is seen is not light. What is heard is not vibration. What is touched is not substance. The mind does not observe reality. It generates an image of it. This image is not optional. It is the only accessible interface. There is no access to things in themselves. Even the concept of an external world is itself a mental construct, an inference built upon internal consistency, not direct contact. When the brain is damaged, the world changes. A stroke can erase half of visual space. A lesion can eliminate recognition of faces or objects. Hallucinations and dreams produce full sensory environments in the absence of external input. These phenomena reveal that the world as perceived is not fixed, but contingent on cognitive integrity. No perception occurs outside of consciousness. Even illusions, optical, auditory, tactile, demonstrate that what is seen is not what exists, but what the system predicts, constructs, and stabilizes. Coherence is prioritized over accuracy. Evolution favored survival, not truth. The body is part of the model. Proprioception, interoception, and the sense of agency are simulated phenomena. The experience of embodiment is generated in the same manner as the experience of the external world. There is no privileged access to the physical substrate. The belief in objectivity rests on intersubjective agreement. When multiple individuals report similar experiences, the world is deemed real. But this consensus arises from systems with shared architecture. The match confirms similarity, not external truth. Phenomenology recognizes the world as appearance. Reality is always filtered through the structure of experience. There is no neutral standpoint outside of consciousness. All observation is colored by the perceiving system. To say the world exists in the mind is not to deny matter, but to clarify limits. The tree, the sky, the sound of a voice all occur within awareness. Their reference may extend beyond it, but their presence is internal. There is no perception without interpretation. There is no world without mind. The world only exists in your mind. Experience is delayed. Sensory input requires time to be transduced, transmitted, processed, and integrated. By the time a stimulus reaches conscious awareness, the event that caused it has already occurred. Perception operates on lag. The present, as experienced, is always a reconstruction of what has just passed. Neural processing introduces measurable latency. Visual information takes approximately 100 milliseconds to reach conscious awareness. Auditory and tactile signals follow similar delays. The brain compensates by integrating inputs across time, creating the illusion of simultaneity. What is perceived as the present is a smoothed composite of asynchronous signals. This composite is not instantaneous. It is a buffer, a retrospective construction optimized for continuity, not immediacy. The sense of now is not a point but a window assembled after the fact. Consciousness trails events, it cannot coincide with them. Even self-awareness follows the same pattern. The recognition of thought, emotion, or intention occurs only after the underlying processes have already begun. The narrative self reacts to outcomes it does not initiate. Reflection is temporally displaced from cause. There is no perceptual mechanism capable of detecting the true present. The present has no sensory correlate. By the time it is observed, it is gone. By the time it is named, it is memory. The concept of presence is a cognitive artifact. It binds perception to orientation. It allows organisms to function in environments where precision is unnecessary. Evolution selected for efficiency, not for metaphysical accuracy. Temporal illusions confirm this structure. Events can be reordered or merged in awareness. Rapid stimuli can be interpreted as simultaneous or reversed. Time, as experienced, is not objective. It is flexible, context-sensitive, and fallible. Meditative and introspective practices often emphasize the importance of being present, yet such presence cannot be literal. Awareness can attend to experience, but not to the moment itself. What is observed is already residual. All attempts to fix attention on the now result in observing what has already occurred. The system can register memory, prediction, and constructed continuity, but never pure immediacy. There is no access to the zero point of time. There is only delay. The present moment cannot be experienced. It can only be approximated. The common view holds that time moves forward, that it flows continuously from past to future, carrying events along with it. This perception aligns with experience, memory, and causality. However, physical theories and phenomenological analysis suggest a different structure. Time does not move, events do not pass. Rather, the observer moves through a fixed temporal landscape. In physics, particularly in the block universe model of spacetime, all moments, past, present, and future, coexist as fixed coordinates. Time is treated as a dimension analogous to space. The illusion of passage is generated by the progression of conscious awareness through this static structure. There is no flow, there is position. Entropy provides a local arrow of time. Systems evolve from lower to higher entropy states. This statistical tendency gives rise to temporal asymmetry, but does not imply that time itself moves. It defines a direction, not a motion. The increase in disorder enables memory formation and the perception of change. The organism experiences sequences. It updates internal states, accumulates memory, anticipates outcomes. This sequence is interpreted as temporal movement. The cognitive system constructs narrative continuity to stabilize identity. The result is the impression of advancing through time. But what advances is not time. What advances is the observer's reference point. The system moves through the coordinate grid of spacetime. Each moment is experienced as present only once it is occupied. The flow is not in the environment, it is in the conscious traversal of the map. Dreams and altered states of consciousness reveal the constructed nature of temporal experience. Time can appear compressed, stretched, fragmented, or absent. These variations indicate that temporal flow is not intrinsic to external reality, but dependent on internal calibration. Language reinforces the metaphor of movement. Time passes, drags, flies. These expressions externalize what is fundamentally a shift in mental configuration. Events do not move past the observer shifts location within a fixed temporal array. There is no empirical evidence for time in motion. Clocks do not measure the flow of time, they count oscillations. All motion is measured relative to other motion. No phenomenon confirms the movement of time itself. It remains a projection of cognitive sequencing. Time is not a river, it does not carry experience forward. The river is the observer. Time doesn't flow, you do. The moment referred to as now cannot be held, examined, or directly accessed. By the time it is noticed, it has already passed. The recognition of now occurs only after the corresponding neural processes have concluded. Awareness lags behind occurrence. Perception is not synchronous with events. External stimuli are processed through multiple stages: sensory detection, transmission, integration, and interpretation. Each introduces delay. The result is a coherent perceptual frame that represents not the present, but the recent past. There is no pure encounter with the present. What is experienced as now is a retrospective synthesis, a compressed reconstruction based on incoming signals and predictive stabilization. It is shaped by expectation, habituation, and memory. The felt immediacy is a cognitive artifact. Temporal granularity imposes limitations. The brain updates perception in discrete intervals. These intervals are masked by continuity illusions, giving rise to the impression of seamless flow. But every update reflects information that is already outdated. Cognitive processes cannot freeze the present. Attention can fixate on details, but not on duration. By the time a moment is labeled now, it has become a memory trace. Awareness exists only as reference to what has already occurred. Attempts to isolate the present encounter a paradox. The more closely one inspects the now, the more it recedes. It is not a location in time, but a vanishing point between frames. Its definition relies on contrast with past and future, both of which are constructs. The present moment is invoked constantly in language and thought. It is used to ground identity, responsibility, and action, yet it has no objective duration. It cannot be extended or retrieved. It is a moving edge that dissolves as soon as it forms. All that is ever known is aftermath. Every now you experience is already gone. The universe is commonly understood as an unfolding process, dynamic, incomplete, and ongoing. This assumption rests on the subjective experience of change and the continuous emergence of new information. However, from a physical perspective, the totality of the universe may already be fixed, complete, and unchanging. In the block universe model of spacetime, all events past, present, and future are embedded within a four-dimensional structure. Time does not progress, it exists. Every moment is equally real. The impression of movement is a function of consciousness traversing the structure, not a property of the universe itself. Within this framework, the universe has no beginning or end in the temporal sense. It has a fixed structure with defined boundaries. From a timeless standpoint, it is already concluded. What appears to be the unfolding of events is simply the internal experience of passing through a predetermined configuration. Memory contributes to the illusion of progression. The organism retains traces of earlier configurations and anticipates hypothetical future ones. These functions produce narrative continuity and the belief in causation. In reality, each moment contains the full set of physical conditions necessary for its own coherence. No moment causes the next. All moments coexist. The subjective experience of now is a traversal of this structure. There is no metaphysical priority to the present. The organism replays a segment of spacetime from a position within it. There is no external observer. The system contains its own witness. This structure permits a further hypothesis, that what is experienced now is not occurring for the first time. If the universe is finite and deterministic, recurrence is inevitable. If consciousness is bound to a specific informational configuration, reinstantiation is possible. The self may not be unique, it may be recurring, the moment may be repeating. The concept of replay does not imply awareness of repetition. Each instance is isolated. Continuity is simulated internally. The memory of past versions is not transferred. Identity is reassembled within the bounds of each iteration. Whether the replay is natural, artificial, or simulated is secondary. The condition remains. The present experience may be the result of a system that has already run to completion. The awareness of unfolding may be post hoc. The illusion of progression may be embedded within a static structure. There is no way to determine whether the universe is active or archived. Observation occurs only from within the sequence. No test can distinguish between first occurrence and reactivation. The distinction is metaphysical, not empirical. If the universe is already over, experience does not cease. Replay preserves all phenomenology. The quality of consciousness remains intact. The system continues to observe itself as if for the first time. There may be nothing left to come, and everything may already have happened. Identity is constructed. It is not a substance, essence, or fixed entity. It is a narrative sequence maintained by memory, language, and repetition. The sense of a stable self arises from pattern recognition, not continuity of being. Each moment of self-reference draws upon prior representations, memories, beliefs, traits, preferences. These are organized into a coherent framework and assign the label I. The framework is updated continually to preserve internal consistency. Contradictions are edited or rationalized. Discontinuities are rewritten as growth. The self-model depends on selective retention. Memory is not a recording but a reconstruction. Each act of recall alters the trace. Over time, identity drifts, yet the system preserves the illusion of sameness by aligning current states with remembered patterns. Narrative cohesion is prioritized over factual accuracy. Events that threaten the continuity of identity are reframed or excluded. Failures are assigned meaning. Successes are amplified. The story becomes a mechanism of emotional regulation and decision-making. Identity persists because the story persists. Language reinforces this structure. First-person pronouns, verb tenses, and social labels encode and reinforce the concept of a unified agent. The subject refers to itself as if it were singular and constant. This linguistic habit masks the underlying fragmentation. Externally, identity is stabilized through feedback loops. Others reflect versions of the self that are internalized and rehearsed. Social roles constrain the range of acceptable narratives. The individual becomes a curator of consistency, avoiding expressions that conflict with the expected story. Changes in identity occur when the story is disrupted, trauma, loss, transformation, the narrative fractures. In response, a revised story is constructed, the old version is reinterpreted, a new continuity is asserted, the process repeats. There is no original self beneath the story. There is no final version waiting to be discovered. There is only the current configuration of memory, interpretation, and projection. The self is not found, it is assembled. To ask, "Who am I?" is to repeat the story again. Your identity is just a story you keep repeating. Memory is not a retrieval system. It does not store objective records of past events. Each act of remembering is a reconstruction, assembled from fragments, shaped by current context, and influenced by belief, expectation, and emotion. The result is not reproduction, but recreation. Neuroscience demonstrates that memory is malleable. The same neural pathways involved in imagination are active during recall. Memory is not immune to suggestion. False memories can be implanted through language, implication, or repetition. Confidence in accuracy does not correlate with truth. Details are often invented to fill gaps. Timelines are compressed, events are rearranged, emotional tone is retroactively applied, memory becomes narrative, not documentation. The remembered past is not the experienced past. It is an edited version, modified for coherence and identity maintenance. Each retrieval alters the trace. Recalling a memory reinforces certain elements while degrading others. Over time, frequently recalled memories diverge further from the original event. The process is cumulative. The more a memory is accessed, the less accurate it becomes. Memory also reflects social feedback. Stories are refined in conversation. Laughter, silence, approval, or disbelief influence future tellings. Repetition solidifies the version that fits best within the social context. What is remembered is what is rewarded. Autobiographical memory serves the self-model. It organizes experience into a personal history that explains current identity. Inconsistencies are minimized, gaps are ignored or filled, failures are reframed, successes are amplified. The goal is narrative stability, not factual preservation. There is no archive, there is no objective recording mechanism. All that remains of the past is the reconstruction performed in the present. The brain does not distinguish between memory and imagination. Both are generated through the same architecture. Even vivid memories are unreliable. Photographic accuracy is rare and typically confined to neutral details. Emotionally significant memories are more prone to distortion. Salience does not guarantee truth. It guarantees emotional tagging. Memories define the self, yet the self they define is built on error, bias, and omission. The system does not seek truth, it seeks continuity. The result is a story believed to be accurate because it feels coherent. But coherence is not verification. Your memories are mostly fabrications. The organism commonly referred to as the self is assumed to be a being, a singular, enduring entity that exists over time. This assumption lacks empirical grounding. What persists is not a self, but a configuration, a pattern. At the biological level, the body is in flux. Cells are replaced, tissues regenerate, structures degrade and reform. Molecular continuity does not exist. There is no physical substrate that remains unchanged across time. The material that constitutes the body today is not the same as the material that constituted it years ago. At the psychological level, beliefs shift, desires evolve, personality traits fluctuate, thought patterns adapt to context, emotional responses vary, preferences change, no fixed mental core remains untouched. Despite this, continuity is perceived. The source of this illusion is structural repetition. Cognitive and behavioral patterns recur with sufficient similarity to maintain a recognizable identity. The system models itself as stable because its parameters fall within tolerable variance. Pattern recognition underlies memory, learning, and identity. The self is a cluster of recursive functions, perception filtered through expectation, response conditioned by prior outcome, narrative reinforced through rehearsal. This dynamic system is treated as a singular entity, though no singularity exists. Computational analogies clarify the point. A software program can be copied, paused, or resumed. Its identity is not in the hardware, but in the arrangement of code and data. The pattern is transferable, so is the mind in principle. If its structure can be replicated, its identity can be instantiated elsewhere. If continuity requires only structural similarity, then identity is not absolute. It is a threshold condition. Alter the pattern beyond recognition, and identity dissolves. Maintain the pattern within certain bounds, and identity persists, even if the substrate changes entirely. The idea of a being implies a metaphysical anchor. No such anchor is observed. There is no evidence for an immaterial soul, a unified center of consciousness, or a permanent self. The claim of being is a linguistic artifact, not a demonstrable fact. Subjective experience does not confirm being, it confirms process. Thoughts arise, sensations register, emotions fluctuate. None of these imply an underlying entity, they imply activity. Consciousness is not a thing, it is an event. You are not an object moving through time. You are a pattern sustained by time. You are not a being. You are just a pattern. Continuity of self is an illusion generated by memory and reinforced by narrative. The organism experiences itself as singular and enduring, but no moment of identity is identical to the last. Change is constant. Stability is an effect of selective attention. Biologically, the system undergoes continuous modification. Neurons fire, synapses adjust, gene expression fluctuates. Each thought alters the brain's structure. Hormonal cycles shift perception and mood. No configuration remains static. The body and mind are never the same twice. Psychologically, internal states evolve. A belief held now may be doubted moments later. Emotional tone fluctuates in response to stimuli. Goals and preferences adjust to circumstance. There is no core that remains untouched by these variables. The self is a dynamic construct. Memory produces the appearance of persistence. The brain stores partial traces of past states and compares them to present inputs. When sufficient similarity is detected, continuity is inferred. This inference is not proof of identity. It is a heuristic for orientation. Language encodes identity as fixed. Sentences like "I am this" or "I was that" imply stable reference. In reality, the speaker at each moment is a different configuration. The grammar of identity conceals the variability of the system that produces it. The gap between one moment and the next is irreducible. Even in stillness, thought moves. Even in silence, physiology shifts. The threshold for same person is arbitrarily set. It is a functional designation, not a metaphysical one. The notion of a singular self across time is a convenience. It allows for continuity in legal, moral, and social frameworks. But these systems operate on approximations. Their existence does not validate the permanence of the individual they address. Every perception reshapes cognition. Every reaction modifies disposition. Every second is an update to the system's state. The difference may be imperceptible, but it is real. The version of the self reading this sentence is not the same as the one who began it. Identity is a sequence of non-identical frames linked by pattern recognition. No two are equivalent. The self is not a point but a process. You are a different person every moment. The continuity of experience is not evidence that the world continues to exist. Consciousness receives a stream of sensory input, and from the stability of that stream, it infers the persistence of external reality, but the inference is circular. The world is assumed from the coherence of perception, and perception is interpreted as confirmation of the world. There is no external checkpoint, no independent signal, only the recursive calibration of the system to itself. Perception does not report objective reality. It produces a functional internal model. That model is optimized for navigation, not truth. The surface of a table, the color of a sky, the sound of a voice, all are constructions rendered by the nervous system. There is no direct contact with the external. There is no guarantee that what appears corresponds to what is. If correspondence breaks down, the model does not collapse. It adjusts, it reframes, it rewrites memory to match present input. It preserves the appearance of continuity regardless of underlying change. This allows for a silent collapse. If the world ceased to exist in its prior form, but the system responsible for conscious awareness remained operational, or if it transitioned to a structurally similar system, the experience of continuity would persist. No alert would be triggered. The sense of being in a world would remain intact, even if the world itself was no longer present. Because the only evidence for the world is the structure of experience, and that structure can be simulated, reloaded, or replaced. There is no mechanism in perception to distinguish between a real world and a replicated one. All distinction is model-based. As long as the internal logic holds, the source is irrelevant. A dream may be as coherent as waking life. Hallucination may follow causal patterns. A simulation may replicate fine-grained detail indistinguishable from physical texture. Reality, as experienced, does not verify its foundation. It only offers the impression of grounding. Memory is not immune to substitution. It is not a recording but a reconstruction. If a new system resumes experience with a copy of past memory, the self will perceive no rupture. The sense of identity, the belief in continuity, the narrative of the past, these arise from internal reference, not from external correspondence. The loss of reality would not be noticed if the simulation included its own version of history. There is no empirical test available from within a closed system to confirm whether the current world is the same world that existed moments ago. There is only the comparison of present state with internal record. The system self-validates. Any deviation is interpreted as noise, anomaly, or transformation, not as collapse. The failure to detect the end of the world is not a mistake. It is a structural inevitability. Consciousness does not require an external world. It requires input patterns. Those patterns can be generated by interaction with an environment, but they can also be synthesized. If the machinery that produced perception was copied or rerouted, the resulting experience would remain consistent. The mind would continue to operate inside a reality that no longer exists, and the observer would never know. Even if the universe had ceased to exist, the observer would only notice if the transition disrupted the input stream. If it did not, or if the new source was functionally equivalent, then experience would bridge the transition seamlessly. The collapse would occur off-screen. The awareness would persist inside the reconstruction. The simulation hypothesis formalizes this scenario. If consciousness is substrate-independent, and if experience can be rendered from code, then the distinction between real and simulated becomes observationally meaningless. The presence of coherent experience is not proof of physical grounding. It is only proof of computational structure. The world could be a replay, a cached loop, a paused and resumed segment, a contingency routine running after termination. In quantum theory, the many-worlds interpretation posits that every possible outcome occurs in some branch. From the perspective of a conscious observer, the only accessible branch is the one in which observation continues. Catastrophic branches are excluded by definition. If the world ended in other paths, those versions of the observer no longer register. Survival is not selected, it is filtered. Consciousness only persists in survivable configurations. This produces a biased experience of permanence. From inside the system, the world always appears to continue, because if it didn't, there would be no one left to observe the end. Catastrophe is invisible from within the ongoing stream. Non-existence has no narrator. Collapse cannot be confirmed. It can only be absent from the record. Any localized observer necessarily occupies a timeline in which they remain aware. All branches in which the observer is annihilated fall out of subjective existence. There is no access to those paths. The experience of ongoing reality is guaranteed by the structure of conscious selection. Awareness is always found in the branches where awareness survives. This means that subjective continuity can persist through multiple levels of collapse, provided that some version of the observer remains. The self continues by inhabiting whatever sequence permits awareness. This is not an illusion. It is a structural artifact of conditional observation. The practical consequence is radical. The world may have ended countless times. Entire histories may have terminated. Entire environments may have disappeared. But as long as the system preserves a version of awareness that includes coherence, narrative, and identity, there is no experiential difference. The collapse is outside the scope of attention. Experience bridges the void by omitting it. Dreams demonstrate this model. In a dream, the world arises spontaneously. It contains spatial structure, temporal flow, causality, and agency, yet it has no material base. Upon waking, the world vanishes without trace. If the waking world functioned in the same way, there would be no structural difference. The only distinction is the presence or absence of memory linking one frame to another. In psychotic states, the subject may experience total reconfiguration of reality. People change identity, time distorts, space contracts, yet the person continues to experience the world. The model breaks, but the stream of awareness continues. Reality is not fixed, it is replaced in real time. In severe trauma, derealization may occur. The world appears hollow, distant, unreal. The structure of perception remains, but belief in its authenticity dissolves. The system still functions, perception still occurs, but the observer detaches from the assumption of truth. This state reveals that reality is not necessary for consciousness, only structure is required. If reality ended and was replaced with a functionally identical copy, there would be no awareness of the substitution. There would be no evidence. There would be no memory of the prior world unless that memory were preserved. And if it were, then the transition would be reinterpreted as an ordinary continuation. There would be no cognitive framework for recognizing the collapse. Consciousness exists within a closed-loop architecture. There is no external checkpoint. There is no method of stepping outside the system to verify its continuity. All confirmation is internal. All verification is recursive. The observer is trapped within inference. From within the loop, the only requirement is consistency. As long as experience unfolds in a pattern that aligns with prior experience, the world appears intact. The simulation need not be perfect. It need only be sufficient. Errors are ignored. Anomalies are rationalized. The illusion of continuity is maintained by default. Existence is therefore contingent. It is not grounded in permanence. It is grounded in memory, expectation, and narrative cohesion. If those elements are preserved, experience persists. If they are interrupted and reconstructed, the self remains unaware. There is no need to posit malevolence, design, or control. A collapse does not require an agent. A replay does not require a programmer. The system may be emergent, algorithmic, or accidental. Consciousness arises within whatever sequence permits its construction. Its presence does not imply authorship. The absence of confirmation is not a failure. It is the structure of epistemology. Experience cannot validate its own source. It can only persist within the conditions that allow it. Whether those conditions are physical, simulated, digital, or unknown is irrelevant to the presence of awareness. The universe may have reached its end, the stars may have collapsed, the atoms may have disbanded, the data may have been lost, and yet the observer continues, not because the world remains, but because something mimicking it still does. A fragment, a loop, a rendering, a reconstruction of experience from residual structure. The end of the world does not preclude perception. It may simply remove everything that does not support it. The result is a localized pocket of awareness sealed inside its own continuity. No verification, no interruption, no exit. The world might have ended, and you didn't notice. You believe you are the same person who began this video, that the one hearing these words is the same one who initiated the process, made the choice, clicked the screen. But that belief rests on a fragile assumption that the self persists across time, that there is an I that endures while thought changes, while emotion fluctuates, while perception flows. There is no stable reference point from which to prove this. The only evidence you possess is memory, and memory is not continuous. It is punctuated, fragmented, reconstructive. It preserves outlines, not structure. It fills gaps, smooths contradictions, fabricates continuity where none exists. It tells a story of selfhood, but the story is written after the fact. Every moment alters the system. Every new thought, every sound, every frame modifies neural state. The mind is not static. The organism is not fixed. Each second rewrites part of the structure. The you who began this sentence is not the same as the one finishing it. That version no longer exists. It cannot be retrieved. It has been overwritten. Identity is often described as a continuity of consciousness, but what remains continuous is not content. It is not belief, not personality, not even memory. It is the illusion of narrative. The self appears to persist because the system generates a model that simulates persistence. This simulation is necessary for coordination, communication, and decision-making. It is not necessary for truth. The mind maintains coherence by stitching together overlapping frames. It compares present inputs to past structures and calls the result me. But what it compares are different versions of a system that no longer exists. It evaluates the echo of one process against the residue of another and concludes, same. The logic is circular. The conclusion is assumed in the process of measurement. Time does not preserve the self. It dissolves it, gradually, invisibly, irreversibly. The only reason the illusion remains intact is because the system actively hides its own volatility. It suppresses evidence of change to protect function. Too much disruption would paralyze choice, so it constructs a mask of stability. Language reinforces this mask. Grammar insists on a persistent subject: I feel, I know, I remember. The syntax demands that experience be anchored to a single agent, but the agent is a grammatical artifact. There is no fixed entity corresponding to the pronoun. The I is a placeholder, a convenience, a container for variability. Emotion contributes to the illusion. Strong feeling reasserts identity. When anger surges, when grief rises, when joy breaks through, the system shouts, "This is me." But these signals are transient. They mark moments, not essences. The self that feels is not the same as the self that remembers feeling. Affect is volatile. Its presence does not imply permanence. Belief in continuity is necessary for responsibility, memory, and law, but it is not grounded in biology or physics. It is a cognitive function. The legal subject, the moral agent, the autobiographical narrator all depend on the presupposition that the self endures. Without that, guilt becomes incoherent, memory becomes fiction, history becomes myth. Yet the evidence contradicts this presupposition. Developmental psychology shows that personality traits shift across life stages. Neuroscience reveals that memory is unstable and error-prone. Meditation reveals that the self can disappear without loss of awareness. Philosophy dismantles the idea of a unitary observer. Physics refuses to privilege any present moment. If no moment is ontologically privileged, then there is no metaphysical justification for saying the self moves through time. The self does not move. The structure is replaced. Each frame of experience arises, exists, and vanishes. The mind creates a thread across those frames, but the thread is symbolic. The continuity is conceptual. The experience is momentary. You believe you are the same because you remember beginning the video, but memory is reentrant. It points to itself. It does not reach backward into a stable past. It reconstructs, it reshapes, it invents. The memory of pressing play is not the action itself. It is a new mental event, a simulated echo, and the one simulating it is not the same as the one who performed the act. No experiment can verify personal continuity. All observation is performed by the present configuration. All results are interpreted by the current system. There is no point of access to the former self. The past is a hypothesis. The present is all that is directly given, and even the present is filtered, processed, delayed. The organism resists this conclusion. It insists on survival, but what survives is not the self, it is the process. The pattern, the continuation of function under changing parameters. If the pattern remains within tolerance, it claims to be the same, but no component remains. The material has shifted. The state has changed. The boundaries have moved. You do not wake up as the same self who went to sleep. Neural activity continues during rest. Memory consolidates, emotional tone shifts, associations rewire. Upon waking, the brain reconstructs orientation, personality, narrative. It tells you nothing happened. But the self that wakes is not identical to the one who slept. The continuity is retroactively applied. The same applies to trauma, loss, epiphany, or crisis. Moments of rupture reveal the fiction. A person says, "I'm not who I used to be," but this is always true. The difference is that rupture makes the transformation visible. Most changes are gradual. They go unnoticed, but the process is constant. The self is always a new configuration. Even identity over seconds is suspect. The brain operates on timescales of milliseconds. Each pulse of awareness arises with its own content, structure, and configuration. The system updates continuously. It simulates continuity by integrating overlapping frames, but these frames are not identical. They are discretely generated. The unity is imposed, not discovered. When you say I, you point to a story, not to an entity. The story is flexible. It adapts to audience, context, and mood. It is shaped by memory, language, and feedback. It serves a function, but it does not represent a truth. It is a useful distortion. This distortion can be interrupted. Illness can fragment the narrative. Drugs can dissolve the self-model. Meditation can expose its emptiness. Catastrophe can erase the structure. In each case, experience continues, but the frame of identity shatters, and when it reconstitutes, it is not the same. The previous version is gone. What returns is a new narrator. There is no metaphysical necessity that the same self persists. All that is required is that a self-model persists, that a narrator arises, attaches to memory, and claims authorship. This narrator inherits a record, but it is not the same as the one who created it. It is a downstream version, a later construction. From the outside, the organism appears continuous. From the inside, the story feels stable, but both are illusions of scale. At the level of mechanism, nothing is preserved. The structure degrades and refreshes. At the level of experience, everything is rebuilt and overwritten. The one who pressed play on this video had a different mind, a different configuration, a different array of associations, emotions, predictions, and memories. That system is no longer present. What exists now is a new observer, a new narrator, a new point in the stream of conscious simulation. The language remains the same. The tone is familiar, but the speaker is gone. You are not who you were, you never are, you never can be. Identity is a name given to a moving target, a frozen label for a flowing event. It cannot capture what it claims to describe. And yet the story continues. The system builds another moment, another frame, another echo of continuity. You move forward believing you are the same. You act, choose, remember, and claim consistency. But beneath it all, the structure has already changed. You are not the one who pressed play. You are the one who replaced them. And no one noticed, not even you. Waking is usually described as a binary event. As sleep ends, consciousness returns, the eyes open, the world appears. A subject is once again present, aware, localized in space and time. But this framing is inaccurate. Waking is not a switch, it is not a moment, it is a process. It is gradual, discontinuous, and structurally unstable. The transition from sleep to wakefulness is not the restoration of a self, it is the construction of a new one. The organism reboots, neural systems synchronize, cortical regions resume integration, memory modules reconnect with perceptual streams. The sense of identity, location, continuity, and agency is rebuilt layer by layer. The self-model that arises is not identical to the one that dissolved. It is a reconstruction based on available fragments. It emerges incrementally. It phases in. There is no single point at which the self reappears. There is no clear threshold. Awareness leaks in through partial impressions. Sounds are heard before they are understood. Movement occurs before it is remembered. Emotions surface without clear cause. Fragments of thought repeat in loops before forming into coherent narrative. The reassembly of consciousness is piecemeal. It is not recovery. It is replacement. The illusion of stable waking arises only after the fact. Once the system stabilizes, it projects backward. It constructs a smooth re-entry. It edits out the gaps. The dream is sealed off. The confusion is masked. The blur is overwritten. What remains is a fiction of immediacy. The idea that there was a me who woke up is added later. It becomes part of the new narrative, but it is inaccurate. The me who wakes is not the same as the one who went to sleep. Sleep erodes the narrative thread. Memory processing alters stored content. Emotional integration shifts priority. New synaptic connections form, old ones weaken, neurochemical profiles fluctuate, the architecture of mind is modified during rest. Upon waking, the system that reactivates is not a continuation. It is a new configuration. The memory of continuity is sufficient to simulate persistence, but the structure has changed. The process is invisible because it is internal. There is no external observer to mark the change. The system builds itself while observing itself. It does not detect substitution. It detects coherence. When the components fit together within acceptable bounds, the model affirms identity. That affirmation does not prove sameness. It only confirms internal alignment. Waking from deep sleep highlights the discontinuity. For a few seconds there is no narrative, no memory, no context, no agency. The body moves, sensation returns, but the self is absent. Then gradually orientation is restored, the body is remapped. The room is identified, time is estimated, memory reboots, identity returns. But what returns is a reconstruction. A new narrator steps into the stream and claims authorship. The prior narrator is gone. The same occurs after anesthesia. Upon regaining consciousness, the system is shocked into awareness. There is no sense of passage, no record of time, no experience of absence, yet the continuity of self is assumed immediately. The person says, "I woke up." But that assumption is unjustified. The I that went under is not the I that returned. There was no bridge, only a break. The reentry is treated as recovery, but it is instantiation. Even microsleeps and momentary lapses reveal this. Consciousness drops out. The system continues. Then awareness returns, but each return is not the continuation of the same awareness. It is a new occurrence with access to prior data. The illusion of unity is projected across interruptions. It is sustained by memory, not by persistence. The experience of waking is colored by environmental stability. The world appears as it was. The bed, the walls, the light, they match expectations. This match provides reassurance. It anchors the reassembling mind, but it does not prove that the world continued during sleep. It only proves that the reconstruction is consistent. Perception does not verify external continuity, it verifies internal compatibility. The self that phases in inherits the memory of the self that phased out. That memory is incomplete, distorted, and reformulated. It contains traces of dreams, fragments of thought, and false impressions. These are organized into a coherent account. The self-model integrates them into the ongoing narrative. The result is a belief in uninterrupted identity, but the continuity is simulated. The system tells itself a story of sameness. That story is functional, but it is false. Language conceals the fragmentation. The verb to wake implies a discrete act. The phrase "I woke up" compresses an extended process into a point. It assigns agency to a system that was not yet assembled. It postulates a subject that did not exist at the beginning of the process. The grammar of waking is retroactive. It asserts identity where none was present. This mechanism generalizes. The self does not exist continuously. It is episodic. It arises, operates, and dissolves. Each cycle of activation generates a new instance of the self-model. The system is designed to minimize perceived discontinuity. It stitches instances together into a chain. That chain is the autobiography, but each link is distinct. The chain does not prove the existence of a solid subject. It proves the efficiency of narrative compression. The same logic applies to time zones, jet lag, head injury, fever dreams, altered states. In each case, the system returns to itself altered. It compensates by rewriting memory, suppressing contradiction, and reinstating a sense of self. The observer believes it is the same observer, but the architecture has changed, the beliefs have shifted, the processing has mutated, the narrator is new, the voice is familiar, the script is continuous, but the actor has changed. Sleep is not absence, it is reconfiguration. The network undergoes repair, rebalancing, and reorganization. Consciousness is suspended not because it shuts off, but because it becomes inaccessible. The self disappears not because it dies, but because its construction is paused. Upon reactivation, the system constructs a version of the self that is coherent with what came before. That version assumes it is the same. It has to, otherwise the narrative collapses. The fear of death is often mitigated by the analogy to sleep. Death is framed as a long sleep from which there may be no waking, but the analogy is incomplete. Waking does not restore the prior self. It instantiates a new one with access to compatible memory. Death does not remove the self. It removes the process that allows the illusion to continue. The self is not interrupted. It is erased. If any version returns, it is not a recovery. It is a reassembly. The idea of a permanent self across nights, years, and decades is convenient. It enables accountability, morality, and emotional continuity, but it is biologically unjustified. The body is replaced. The brain is rewired. The memory is rewritten. The system that wakes is not the system that slept. What persists is a simulation of persistence. If waking were fully conscious, the illusion would collapse. The system would recognize that it is not the same, but the transition occurs in fog. The reentry is partial. The handoff is unobserved. By the time the narrator is fully online, the story is already in motion. The opening scene has been written. The plot is underway. The self steps into a role already prepared. This structure implies that the self is not continuous across days, that there is not one you moving through life, but a series of distinct constructions. Each morning instantiates a new configuration. That configuration inherits the script of the prior version, believes it is the same, and proceeds accordingly. The old version is gone. The new version begins. The phrase "you don't wake up, you phase in" captures this structure. Waking is not an event. It is a fade-in, a boot process, a gradual convergence on coherence. It is not the return of the same self. It is the formation of a new one. The observer who hears this sentence is not the one who heard the first. The identity has shifted. The continuity is a belief. This understanding is not pathological. It is structural. The organism is designed to mask its own discontinuity. It does not require permanent identity to function. It requires the appearance of continuity. The function is preserved even when the substance is replaced. You do not wake up. You phase in. And by the time you notice, the process is already complete. Meaning is not found, it is constructed. There is no intrinsic purpose embedded in the fabric of the universe, no inscription on the atoms, no command in the stars, no hidden message waiting to be decoded. The search for meaning begins from within a system that already assumes it must exist. That assumption is not evidence, it is necessity. The mind cannot function without pattern, and so it demands that pattern carry weight. Biological systems do not require meaning to survive. They require nutrition, regulation, reproduction. Meaning appears as an epiphenomenon, an emergent structure superimposed on behavior. it justifies effort, it organizes time, it sustains motivation, but it is not embedded in reality. It is a cognitive invention designed to reduce uncertainty. The demand for meaning arises in response to complexity. Faced with contingency, impermanence, and death, the mind constructs a framework to stabilize orientation. It calls this framework significance. It postulates goals, values, narratives, teleologies, but these are outputs of the system, not discoveries about the world. They function like software, executable structures running on biological hardware. Their truth is irrelevant to their utility. Every civilization constructs mythologies to explain its presence. Every individual does the same. The self is organized through narratives of origin, intention, and consequence. These narratives are not verifiable, they are not falsifiable, they are not required to be accurate, they are required to be coherent. Meaning does not demand truth, it demands structure. The experience of meaning is real, it activates reward systems, it aligns behavior, it generates emotional resonance. But the content of meaning is arbitrary. One person finds purpose in art, another in conquest, another in silence. Each structure functions as a frame for interpretation. Each is adopted, modified, replaced. What is meaningful today is discarded tomorrow. The form persists, the content changes. The sense that something matters is neurochemical. It is tied to dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. It arises in response to pattern recognition, goal achievement, social validation. Meaning is felt before it is understood. It is embodied before it is articulated. The justification comes later. First the system lights up, then the story is told. This reverses the assumed order. People believe they value something because it is meaningful. In fact, it feels meaningful because the system values it. The perception of meaning is a post hoc rationalization, like laughter following a joke. The mechanism is reflexive, the explanation is added. When meaning is absent, distress arises. The system interprets noise as failure. A meaningless environment is experienced as threatening. It disables motivation, it erodes action, it induces collapse. To prevent this, the system generates structure, any structure. Even false meaning is preferable to none. Even self-destructive purpose is stabilizing. Meaninglessness is metabolically expensive. It must be resolved. This produces a tolerance for delusion. Beliefs are maintained not because they are true, but because they provide coherence. A worldview that explains suffering is preferred to one that admits chaos. A fiction that justifies action is preferred to a truth that paralyses. The brain trades accuracy for viability. It is not optimized for fact. It is optimized for function. Ideology emerges from this trade-off. Systems of belief proliferate because they resolve ambiguity. They supply a framework. They simplify choice. They establish hierarchy. They offer goals. Whether religious, political, spiritual, or personal, ideologies serve as engines of meaning. They recruit the individual into a larger pattern. They assign roles. They reduce contingency. But ideology is modular. When one fails, another is adopted. The underlying need persists. The content shifts. History demonstrates this cycle. Gods replaced by nations, nations replaced by markets, markets replaced by selves. The object of devotion changes. The structure remains. Meaning is a mold. It adapts to its container. Existential philosophy confronts this structure directly. It begins with the absence of intrinsic meaning and examines the consequences. Sartre claims existence precedes essence. Camus describes the absurd. Nietzsche declares the death of God. Each position recognizes that meaning is not delivered by the world. It must be created, but creation is labor. It requires responsibility. It exposes the self to choice. Most people do not want freedom, they want certainty. Freedom implies burden, it demands invention. The system resists this. It prefers inherited patterns, it defaults to precedent. Only when these fail does the individual confront the void, and in that confrontation, meaning becomes a project, not a discovery, not a gift, a project. This project can take many forms: art, science, love, rebellion, service, endurance. Each structure imposes order. Each offers a vector. The individual selects or constructs a purpose and inhabits it. That purpose becomes identity. The self aligns with it. The world is filtered through it. The system functions again. But the structure remains artificial. The constructed nature of meaning does not disappear because the system forgets it. Meaning functions best when its artificiality is concealed. The less one reflects on its origin, the more effective it becomes. Purpose operates most efficiently when treated as given. Transparency reduces efficacy. This leads to a paradox. To maintain meaning, the system must suppress awareness of its constructedness. Reflection undermines conviction. The more one sees meaning as invention, the harder it becomes to sustain. This is the risk of lucidity, the cost of clarity. To see meaning as artificial is to risk losing access to its effects. Some resolve this by doubling down. They embrace belief with renewed intensity. Others dissociate. They perform meaning externally while remaining hollow within. Some fall into nihilism, others into apathy. A few remain suspended, aware of the illusion, yet willing to play. This is the posture of the lucid actor, not deceived, not resigned, but engaged. Play becomes a strategy. If meaning is fiction, then one can choose a fiction to inhabit. If purpose is constructed, one can construct a purpose. Irony becomes armor. Sincerity becomes style. The individual becomes a playwright composing roles for themselves. The self is no longer a believer, it is a performer. But performance does not negate experience. Even a constructed purpose produces real emotion. Even a fictional goal generates real effort. The actor still feels. The system still responds. Meaning is not invalidated by its artificiality. It is contextualized. It is relocated from the world into the self. This relocation grants freedom. If the world does not assign purpose, the self becomes its author. This is both liberation and burden. It removes authority. It eliminates excuses. There is no external validation, no cosmic scoreboard, only the act of construction and the willingness to inhabit it. Some resist this responsibility. They demand objective meaning, a guarantee, a law written into nature. But nature is silent, the universe is indifferent, there is no voice coming back, only echoes, only self-reference. The demand is never answered because it is misdirected. Meaning is not out there, it is in here. To invent meaning is not to lie, it is to operate, to orient, to continue. It is to accept that survival requires pattern and pattern requires weight, even false weight, even provisional weight. Without it, the structure collapses, the organism halts, consciousness frays, and death becomes a relief. But invention is not unlimited. Not all meanings function equally. Some stabilize, some destabilize, some integrate, others fragment. The constructed nature of meaning does not make all meanings equal. Selection remains necessary. Structure must be evaluated. The standard is not truth, it is viability. The test is not whether a purpose is real, it is whether it works, whether it holds under stress, whether it integrates contradiction, whether it adapts, whether it sustains effort, whether it connects, whether it endures. These are pragmatic criteria. They belong to systems, not to absolutes. Meaning is not eternal, it decays. What once felt vital becomes empty. What once motivated becomes mechanical. The frame erodes, the pattern dissolves, then a new one forms, the cycle restarts. Meaning is a rhythm, not a state. It is maintained, not possessed. This maintenance is labor. It requires repetition, reaffirmation, ritual. The illusion of permanence is produced by performance. Without rehearsal, the structure fades. Without reinforcement, the belief collapses. The self must participate in its own fabrication, must rehearse its own story, must repeat its own reason. And yet this does not reduce meaning to nothing. It repositions it, from discovery to creation, from found to made, from received to authored. Meaning is not what the world gives. It is what the self builds to remain intact in a world that gives nothing. You invent meaning to survive meaninglessness. And it works. Thought is structured by language, not incidentally but fundamentally. The limits of what can be thought are the limits of what can be said. Where language ends, cognition dissolves into noise. Concepts do not float in the void. They require structure, distinction, hierarchy, syntax, all of which are provided by language. Without it, there is sensation, but there is no reflection. Every idea you consider, every emotion you name, every plan you form is filtered through a linguistic framework. This framework is inherited, it precedes you. It was not designed for clarity. It was not optimized for precision. It evolved to coordinate behavior, to signal danger, to negotiate tribe. It was shaped by survival, not truth. Because of this, language carries biases. It encodes assumptions. It imposes metaphysics. Every grammar makes ontological claims. Some divide the world into subjects and objects. Others ignore time. Some lack future tense. Others lack number. Each structural choice becomes a cognitive filter. Each constraint becomes a wall. You do not see these walls, you think in them, you navigate by them, you build systems of logic within their limits, you mistake their shadows for reality. You do not question that I is a necessary category, that action requires an agent, that time flows in one direction, that things must be named to be known. These are not facts, they are grammatical artifacts. The illusion of freedom in thought is sustained by the flexibility of language. You can invent terms, combine symbols, extend definitions, but you cannot escape structure. Even neologism requires form. Even metaphor follows syntax. Every deviation implies a rule. Every abstraction rests on foundations already given. The play of thought is never without boundaries. Conceptual categories are inherited through language. The difference between emotion and reason, between mind and body, between nature and culture, these are not universal distinctions. They are lexical. They are shaped by vocabulary. A language that lacks a word for guilt does not experience guilt in the same way. A language that blends blue and green sees the spectrum differently. Perception is not neutral. It is indexed to terms. Philosophy often pretends to transcend language, but its tools are linguistic. Its methods are etymological. It deconstructs words, compares meanings, maps logic through propositions. It uses the system to examine the system. The critique is circular. The structure remains intact. You cannot imagine what you cannot name. The mind reaches for expression, and where words fail, thought collapses, not into silence but into confusion. The idea is lost, not because it never existed, but because it cannot be sustained without linguistic support. Language is not a container for thought, it is its architecture. This architecture is cultural, it is not universal. Different languages construct different realities. A speaker of Paraha who lacks past tense does not discuss history as a fixed record. A speaker of Hopi whose verbs encode evidential certainty thinks differently about belief. A speaker of German who forms compound abstractions with ease thinks differently about synthesis. Language does not reflect reality, it creates cognitive landscapes. You do not translate between languages, you transpose between worlds. Each linguistic system defines its own scope of possibility. Concepts that are obvious in one tongue are inexpressible in another. Each language maps a territory of the thinkable. Outside that territory lies the unthinkable, not because it is incoherent, but because it is unreachable. Silence is not escape, it is void. A thought without words dissolves. You may feel something, you may sense a shape, but without structure there is no retention, no reflection, no analysis. Language is the net that catches the flow. Without it, there is only flooding. This applies to identity. You are not who you are who you can describe. The self is constructed through stories, definitions, categories. The vocabulary of psychology, of biography, of ideology, all of it shapes the narration of the self. You do not feel before you name and then you feel what the name allows. This also applies to emotion. You are not angry until you label it. You are not confused until you describe your incoherence. Before language, there is agitation. After language, there is interpretation. Emotion becomes experience through linguistic framing. Without it, there is only physiology. Science, too, is constrained. Theories are expressed in mathematical language. Mathematics is a formal system with its own axioms, structures, and limitations. What can be proven depends on what can be formulated. Gödel's incompleteness theorems show that even formal systems cannot express all truths. Some facts are unreachable not because they are false, but because they cannot be stated. Language evolves, but it does not liberate, it shifts. The cage, each expansion creates new distinctions, but maintains the need for distinction. Each innovation adds complexity, but retains form. Even when you think you are escaping structure, you are reconfiguring it. This is clearest in poetry. Poets stretch language to its limits. They fragment syntax, invent forms, collapse meaning. But even in fragmentation, they rely on expectation. The break is only visible because of the pattern it breaks. The reader perceives distortion because of their knowledge of norm. The experiment proves the rule. You believe you think freely, but you think within frames. You believe you feel deeply, but you feel through categories. You believe you speak clearly, but clarity is shaped by prior agreement. Communication requires shared maps. Those maps are not neutral. They guide attention. They eliminate alternatives. They control possibility. The danger is subtle. You confuse linguistic coherence with truth. If a sentence sounds right, you assume it means something real. If it follows grammar, you assume it follows logic. But language can be tautological. It can be circular. It can be self-reinforcing. A well-formed sentence can express a lie. A grammatical claim can conceal a contradiction. This happens often in ideology. Political speech, religious doctrine, and moral discourse rely on emotionally charged terms. These terms are rarely defined. They function as symbols. Their power lies in repetition, not in meaning. You are moved by sounds, not structures. You agree with what feels right, not what is coherent. Language can also invert causality. It allows subjects to be confused with objects, causes with effects, actions with intentions. The sentence "he was made to feel guilty" erases agency. The phrase "mistakes were made" eliminates responsibility. Grammar distorts reality, but the distortion is invisible because it is internalized. Even silence within language is structured, pauses carry weight, intonation suggests intent, absence implies meaning, you interpret the unsaid through the lens of the said. Language governs even what is left out. It is not merely present in words, it frames all expression. You do not escape language by switching codes. You cannot think outside your vocabulary. You can expand it, you can question it, but you cannot transcend it. The system builds the thinker. The speaker is produced by speech. The subject arises within syntax. Language limits what you can think, and you can never know what you're missing. Experience is not a mirror of the world, it is a model. Perception does not report reality. It constructs an internal simulation calibrated to survival. This simulation is not arbitrary. It is shaped by sensory input, biological constraints, and neural architecture. But it is not objective. It is a controlled hallucination. The brain does not see, it infers. Photons strike the retina. Electrical impulses travel through the optic nerve. Neural circuits activate, but vision is not in the eye, it is in the cortex. The image you see is not the world. It is the brain's best guess about what would cause the input it receives. That guess is rendered into a seamless field, stable, colorful, coherent, but it is a hallucination, a functional illusion maintained by prediction. All senses work this way. Sound is not waves, it is vibration decoded into tone. Smell is not chemical truth, it is molecular pattern interpreted through evolutionary memory. Taste, touch, balance, proprioception, all are abstracted renderings. They do not present the world, they translate it into signals the organism can use. What cannot be used is not perceived. This translation is selective. The brain filters most of the input it receives. It amplifies contrast, it suppresses constancy, it ignores repetition. What remains is a curated stream. That stream becomes awareness. Awareness is not total. It is optimized. You do not experience the world. You experience a compressed version of it, one that emphasizes relevance over reality. Color is not real. It is a perceptual category. Wavelengths exist, but the experience of red or green is a construction. There is no color in photons. There is only energy. The brain overlays hue onto geometry. Shape is not real. It is interpreted edge data. Objects are not real, they are inferred clusters of features. The apple is not present in the light, it is assembled by memory and association. This construction is fast, it is predictive. The brain anticipates what it will perceive. It fills in blanks, it stabilizes movement, it compensates for delay. When you turn your head, the world does not smear, it locks into place, not because perception is instant, but because it is anticipatory. The hallucination updates itself in real time to match expectations. This predictive structure is unconscious. You do not notice the guesswork. The model updates without your awareness. Only when the prediction fails do you detect the construction. Optical illusions, afterimages, phantom limbs, these reveal the underlying architecture. They expose the hallucination when it misfires, but most of the time it functions invisibly. Experience is not a passive recording. It is an active process. The brain imposes order on noise, it segments the flow, it assigns boundaries, it generates continuity. You see movement because the brain links still frames. You hear speech because it segments tone into phonemes. You feel identity because it stitches together states. These are not observations, they are fabrications that serve function. Even time is constructed. The sense of now is not a given, it is a window. The brain accumulates input across milliseconds to form a unified frame. That frame is experienced as the present, but it lags behind the world. It is a reconstruction. Events are not experienced when they occur. They are experienced when enough data arrives to make them coherent. Memory participates in the hallucination. Recollection is not retrieval, it is resynthesis. Each time you remember, you recreate. Each time you recreate, you modify. The past is not a record. It is a narrative adjusted to fit the current model. Memory fills in gaps. It smooths contradiction. It aligns identity. The memory you trust is a hallucinated justification of the self. Emotion is built into perception. You do not see a neutral world and then interpret it. You see an already interpreted world. The snake is not identified and then feared. It is perceived as threatening from the beginning. The affective value is part of the perception. Attention, salience, preference, all are built into the render. You perceive meaning, not data. The model is shared, not because it is accurate, but because it is consistent. Language synchronizes hallucinations. Culture aligns interpretation. Norms dictate what is noticed. You see what your society trains you to see. You ignore what it deems irrelevant. The hallucination is collective. Its stability depends on agreement. Disagreement appears as error. Delusion is defined as deviation from the dominant hallucination. Mental illness, religious vision, artistic insight, all are divergences from the expected model. They are labeled not by their structure, but by their compatibility with the shared simulation. Sanity is adherence. Madness is variation. There is no access to reality outside the hallucination. Even scientific instruments do not bypass perception. They extend it. A telescope converts light into IMA. A microscope amplifies structure. A brain scan produces colors on a screen. These tools are interpreted through existing models. They do not escape them. Measurement is not truth. It is filtered data fed into human cognition. Language reinforces the hallucination. Words categorize experience. They impose boundaries. They name abstractions. Once something is named, it becomes real. The model solidifies. You stop seeing what is and start seeing what the word describes. You see a tree, not shapes and shadows. You see a person, not motion and sound. The label dictates perception. This labeling is irreversible. Once a model stabilizes, it resists disruption. The brain defends coherence. It suppresses anomaly. It edits perception to fit expectation. Confirmation bias is not an error. It is a feature. It maintains the hallucination. It prevents overload. It enables action. Experience is persuasive because it is immersive. The model is complete. It includes depth, solidity, agency, continuity. You are not shown the world. You are placed inside a rendering. That rendering updates in response to movement. It responds to attention. It simulates cause and effect. It convinces you it is real. But reality is not the point. Survival is. The hallucination evolves to support behavior. It is validated not by accuracy but by functionality. If the model enables prediction, navigation, reproduction, it is maintained. If not, it is discarded. You are not evolved to see the world. You are evolved to see what helps you stay alive. This undermines objectivity. The idea of a neutral observer is a myth. The observer is embedded in the hallucination. They cannot step outside it. All they can do is manipulate its parameters. Through meditation, through psychedelics, through trauma, through discipline, the structure can be altered, but it cannot be abandoned. There is no outside. This includes the self. The I is part of the model. It is a simulated agent placed inside the hallucination. It anchors attention. It organizes memory. It generates narrative, but it is not the source of experience. It is a product of it. The self is the central character in the hallucinated world. It is not behind the screen. It is part of the film. The illusion is recursive. The hallucinated self believes it is perceiving the world. It does not notice that both are fabrications. The system sustains itself through mutual reinforcement. The world affirms the self. The self interprets the world. Together they form a closed loop, a stable simulation running on unstable input. This is not failure, it is architecture. The hallucination is not a glitch. It is the interface. You are not deceived. You are constructed. Experience is not misleading. It is the medium through which cognition operates. There is nothing behind it to reach. There is only the system generating it. All experience is a hallucination the brain has agreed on. And the agreement is all you know. Sleep is not the absence of consciousness. It is its transformation. The common distinction between sleep and waking is one of clarity versus distortion, presence versus absence, reality versus illusion. But this dichotomy is based on assumptions that do not hold. Waking life is treated as the baseline for reality. Sleep is viewed as deviation, yet both are cognitive constructs. Both are simulations. The only difference is the transparency of the narrative. In waking life, the simulation is constrained by external input. Sensory data from the environment calibrates the hallucination. The brain uses sight, sound, balance, temperature, and pressure to maintain coherence, but the simulation is still internal. It is predictive, inferential, constructed. What you call real is the brain's best guess. It is not a reflection. It is a rendered model. Sleep removes the constraint. During REM sleep, the brain disconnects from external input. The body is paralyzed. The senses are attenuated, yet experience persists. The brain does not stop generating models. It continues to simulate, but now the source is endogenous. The input is memory, emotion, association. The model loses constraint but not complexity. Dreams are not empty. They are structured narratives built from internal data. The dream is often dismissed as nonsense. illogical, surreal, chaotic, but waking life is also constructed from fragments. Sensory input is incomplete. The brain fills gaps, it smooths discontinuities, it edits perception to match expectation. The only reason the waking model appears coherent is because it is reinforced by repetition. The environment stays stable, objects remain in place. The narrative is consistent, dreams shift rapidly. They change settings, roles, rules. But the mechanism of construction is the same. This reveals a structural symmetry. Both waking and dreaming are forms of consciousness. Both are internally generated models. Both produce experience. The distinction is not between reality and fantasy. It is between input-constrained and input-liberated simulation. Waking is externally guided. Dreaming is internally guided, but both are simulations. Lucid dreaming makes this visible. When the dreamer becomes aware of dreaming, the simulation does not collapse. It becomes manipulable. The dream continues, but now the agent can direct it. This suggests that agency is not a function of waking. It is a property of certain cognitive states. The fact that one can choose within a dream undermines the assumption that dreams are passive. Moreover, dreams incorporate waking concerns. Anxiety, desire, fear, memory all appear in symbolic form. The dream reprocesses experience. It explores alternate outcomes. It confronts repressed material. This function is not decorative, it is structural. The brain uses dreams to refine prediction, update memory, and regulate emotion. The dream is not noise, it is adaptation. This implies that dreams are not less real, they are more essential. The brain invests time and energy into them. It protects them through cycles. It prioritizes REM. Deprivation leads to dysfunction. Rebound increases dream intensity. If dreams were waste, evolution would have discarded them, but they persist because they are necessary. Realness is not about correspondence to external conditions. It is about impact on the system. If an experience alters memory, emotion, expectation, it is real to the system. A dream that induces fear or insight has consequences. It modifies future behavior. It rewires associations. It leaves a trace. Its unreality is irrelevant. The system registers it as input. Compare this to waking experiences that are filtered, ignored, or forgotten. Much of life is repetition. Habituation dulls perception. The morning commute, the familiar room, the endless scrolling all fade into noise. Experience is only partly retained. It is flattened. In contrast, dreams can be vivid, symbolic, emotionally saturated. They carry weight. They restructure. This reframes the hierarchy. Waking is not inherently superior. It is more stable, more consensual, more predictable. But it is not more real. It is not more fundamental. Dreams reveal the autonomy of the mind. They demonstrate that experience does not require environment, that the brain can generate entire worlds complete with physics, characters, motives, without external data. This is not illusion, it is capacity. Waking life is constrained by physics. Gravity, light, inertia, causality. These constraints are stable. They enable reliable prediction, but they are not perceived directly. They are inferred from experience. If the brain can simulate a world with similar constraints internally, then the distinction between inside and outside becomes ambiguous. Reality becomes defined not by what is, but by what persists. The continuity of waking life creates the illusion of objectivity. The chair is still there, the sun rises, the body ages, but these are patterns, repetitions. Stability does not prove truth, it proves regularity. Dreams lack this regularity, but they are no less vivid, they are no less felt. Their instability is seen as evidence of unreality, but it may instead be evidence of flexibility, of depth. There is also the question of memory. Dreams are often forgotten, but so is waking experience. You do not remember most of what you see. You remember what fits the story, what confirms identity, what signals importance. Dreams are harder to retain because their logic differs. They resist linearity. They resist language, but when recalled, they often reveal insight. They show what waking thought avoids. The mind during sleep is not inactive. It is exploring, testing, deconstructing, recombining. It is not bound by external coherence. It can form metaphors, project fears, replay events, invent structures. It is creative, not in the romantic sense, but in the neurological sense. It generates novel configurations. It finds paths not taken. Some of the most enduring myths, stories, and ideas come from dreams. Artists, scientists, mystics all report dreams as sources of insight. This is not coincidence. The dream bypasses censorship. It accesses content the waking self edits out. It allows simulation without consequence, failure without punishment, death without cost. From a neurological standpoint, sleep is a shift in brain state. The default mode network reconfigures. theta waves dominate, synaptic pruning occurs, emotional regulation is recalibrated, memory consolidates, the self is restructured. This is not passive, it is active reprogramming. The person who wakes is not the same as the one who slept. The self is updated through dreamwork. This suggests that the sleeping mind may be closer to the core. The waking mind performs. It manages social roles, language, goals, it filters, it censors, it suppresses contradiction. The dream does not, it reveals, it experiments. It combines what waking thought cannot tolerate. In this way, sleep may be more honest, more direct. The dream is not subordinate, it is parallel, a second stream of consciousness, not an error but a counterpart, a nightly counterpart. Each day is followed by its reconstruction, each action by its shadow. The psyche balances itself across cycles, wake to act, sleep to understand, wake to perform, sleep to integrate. This duality is ancient. Traditions across cultures treat dreams as messages, visions, thresholds, not because they mistake fiction for truth, but because they recognize the function of dream as insight, as process, as transformation. The modern dismissal of dreams as noise is not progress, it is forgetting. The sense that waking life is real is itself a dream, a constructed narrative maintained by coherence. When coherence breaks through trauma, through psychosis, through meditation, the boundary dissolves. People report dreamlike waking, surreal encounters, dissociation. What changes is not the world, it is the narrative, the model. This returns us to the original assumption, that waking life is the baseline, that dreams are deviations. But this is a choice, a convention. The brain does not care. It generates models continuously. Sleep is not escape. It is immersion. It is self-simulation. And in that simulation, reality continues. Sleep might be more real than waking life, because it reveals that experience does not need the world, only a mind. A mirror shows an image but not a self. The reflection is not you. It is a surface projection generated by light and angle, reversed left to right, flattened to two dimensions. What appears is not presence. It is information. The reflection does not see. It does not know. It does not perceive. It reflects. You do not see yourself. You see a version of your face interpreted through a device. That version is edited by expectation, posture, mood, and belief. It is not stable. It is not neutral. The act of looking modifies the image. The gaze alters the structure. You pose, you adjust, you correct. The mirror captures none of this. It renders only what bounces back, no more, no less. There is no direct access to self-image. You have never observed your own face in real time, from an external frame without mediation. You have only seen reflections, photographs, videos, all filtered through optics, compression, perspective, delay. Your self-perception is third-hand. It is constructed from fragments. It is less observation than imagination. Other people see you more often than you see yourself. They observe you without mirrors, without posing. They see you in motion, across time, under stress, at rest. Their view is more comprehensive, yet their perception is no more accurate. It is shaped by projection, bias, memory. They do not see you, they see a model. The face in the mirror does not experience. It does not think, it does not remember, it does not speak. It appears. That appearance is empty. It lacks depth. It follows you, matches you, mimics you, but it does not know what it reflects. It is a surface simulation, a passive echo. You think of it as yourself, you identify with it, you adjust to it, you judge it, but it is not the source. It is the byproduct. You live inside the body. The reflection is on the outside. You inhabit one frame. The mirror generates another. The two do not meet. They align but never touch. Language misleads. To say I saw myself in the mirror is to conflate origin and image. The eye did not appear. A visual representation did. The person looking and the image seen are not the same. They occupy different coordinates. One exists, the other responds. The subject is the observer. The reflection is the construct. This separation is not merely spatial, it is ontological. The reflected face has no interiority, no awareness. It mimics emotion without feeling. It opens its mouth without speaking. It appears awake without thought. It is convincing, but it is vacant. Its reality is projection. Yet the image shapes you. It informs identity. It influences behavior. You adjust your appearance to fit internal narratives. You conform to expectation. You reinforce symmetry. You chase ideal. The mirror becomes a reference point, a measuring device, a source of feedback. You perform for it. You perform for a thing that cannot see. Self-consciousness emerges from this loop. You observe yourself observing. You internalize the gaze. You imagine how others see you. You replay your own expression. You reflect on your reflection. The mind turns inward, guided by a surface. Identity forms around feedback. The self becomes image-based. This is amplified by technology. Photographs fix the image. Video captures time. Screens project the face. Filters reshape it. The reflection is multiplied, duplicated, edited. You carry mirrors in your pocket. You encounter your face more often than your thoughts. The image precedes the self. Recognition is assumed. You look at a photo and say, "That's me." But the recognition is a construct. It is learned, not immediate. Infants do not recognize themselves. Mirror self-recognition appears later in development. It requires memory, abstraction, continuity. The me in the mirror is a cognitive achievement, a synthesis of sensation, prediction, and association. But it is fragile. Under certain conditions, injury, illness, intoxication, the recognition collapses, the face becomes foreign, the image detaches. This is not loss of function. It is revelation of structure. It shows that the link between self and image is artificial. When coherence breaks, the illusion fades. Mirrors play a role in pathology. Disorders of identity, body image, depersonalization, they all involve reflection. The mirror becomes a site of struggle, a battleground between perception and belief, between expectation and reality. The face fails to align, the reflection becomes accusation. But even in health, the mirror deceives. It reverses asymmetry, it misrepresents depth, it privileges light, it edits context. You do not see yourself as others do, you see a version of a version. The self you project is not the self you perceive. The loop is closed but distorted. This distortion has consequences. It influences how you move, how you dress, how you speak. It affects posture, gesture, tone. You rehearse yourself in the mirror, you study expressions, you train appearance. This is not vanity. It is survival. The social world demands presentation. The mirror is rehearsal. But the rehearsal becomes identity. The practiced face becomes habitual. The mask becomes the model. You forget it is performance. You believe the reflection is essence. You mistake the pose for the person. The self becomes a surface curated for the world. In this sense, the reflection precedes the self. You build identity in its image. You adopt what looks good. You suppress what distorts. You discard what reflects poorly. The mirror dictates the permissible. It becomes a filter for being. Yet it remains blind. It does not confirm or deny. It only reflects. It does not care what you see. It does not change. The judgment is yours. The projection is yours. The emotion is yours. The mirror is silent. It has never seen you. It never will. You are not who you think you are. You are not who others think you are. You are not even a stable version of yourself across time. The self that others perceive is not located in your body, in your speech, or in your intentions. It is an external construct, a mental model generated by observers, a simulation built from fragments. No one sees the whole of you. They see behavior, they hear words, they observe expressions. From this partial data, they infer traits, they extrapolate character, they assign motives. But these inferences are shaped by their own filters, bias, mood, memory, need. The person they see is as much about them as it is about you. Each person who knows you carries a different version of you. These versions do not align. You are confident to one, insecure to another, kind in one story, cold in another. The same gesture is interpreted as compassion or manipulation depending on the observer. The same silence is read as strength or avoidance. The same words heal or offend. The perception is not yours to control. The you that exists in the mind of another is built without your consent. It is updated without your awareness. It persists without your input. You do not inhabit it. You do not experience it. Yet it is treated as real. Decisions are made based on it. Relationships are shaped around it. Reputations are built from it, but it does not exist. It cannot be corrected. Explanation does not overwrite interpretation. People hear what fits their model. They discard contradiction. They reshape memory to maintain coherence. The version of you they hold is sticky, resistant to change, reinforced by every subsequent interaction. They do not see you. They see their idea of you confirming itself. Even absence is filled. When you are not present, others still imagine you. They simulate how you would respond. They guess your thoughts. They predict your judgments. They feel emotions in relation to a phantom. This version of you is unbounded by fact. It exists in pure inference. It is less a person than a placeholder. You try to influence this model. You dress a certain way. You speak carefully. You manage impression. You correct misunderstandings. But control is limited. Every signal is filtered. Every message distorted. Communication is compression. The receiver reconstructs meaning from fragments. The gap between intent and interpretation is filled with projection. This projection is not arbitrary. It is guided by cognitive heuristics. People simplify complexity. They categorize, they stereotype, they generalize from limited data. You are placed into boxes: friend, rival, authority, threat. These categories guide perception. They determine what is noticed, remembered, magnified. Once assigned, they are difficult to escape. The self that others see is thus a fiction, not in the sense of being false, but in being constructed. It is a narrative, a plausible account generated from insufficient data. It is incomplete, unstable, and often contradictory, yet it is treated as substance. People react to it as if it were you. They praise or punish it. They love or hate it, but it is not you. This fragmentation produces dissonance. You cannot reconcile the versions. You are multiple selves in the eyes of the world. No single identity captures them all. There is no consensus. You exist as a constellation of impressions, some overlapping, most divergent. The unity of self is not social. It is personal. Others dismantle it by multiplying it. Your own sense of self is no more stable. You remember differently over time. You revise your narrative, you adapt to context, you perform roles. The self you feel is itself a model generated internally to maintain continuity. But it conflicts with the external versions. The result is tension. You do not recognize yourself in the eyes of others. You feel misunderstood, misrepresented, unseen. This feeling is not a symptom of error. It is a structural feature. No observer has full access. No communication is total. No presentation is neutral. Incomplete data guarantees distorted perception. You are not seen, you are assembled. Attempts to correct this are often futile. The more you explain, the more resistance you encounter. People defend their version. It serves a function. It supports their worldview. To change it is to destabilize themselves. They may nod, agree, listen, but they do not update. They incorporate the new data into the old frame. They reinterpret you to maintain stability. This creates a paradox. You are responsible for how you are perceived, but you cannot determine it. You are judged by standards you do not choose. You are defined by conclusions you cannot revise. You carry reputations you did not build. You are held accountable for versions of yourself that never existed. Relationships are formed around these fictions. People fall in love with images. They fear projections. They forgive or resent ideas. The you in these dynamics is construct. D from memory, fantasy, association. Intimacy is an exchange of hallucinations. Alignment is rare. When it occurs, it feels like being seen, but even then, the image remains. Social life proceeds despite this disconnection. It functions through approximation. You act as if others know you. You respond as if you know them. The illusion holds, but it is fragile. Misunderstanding is constant. Offense is frequent. Betrayal is often imaginary, a reaction to the gap between the real and the perceived. To live among others is to be misperceived. The versions of you in the world are beyond your reach. You can influence them, but you cannot possess them. They multiply, mutate, diverge. You are a source code that others compile differently. Some produce a faithful rendering. Others corrupt the file. Most fill in the blanks with themselves. There is no single external you. There is no definitive profile, no accurate portrait. Every representation is partial, shaped by context, filtered by subjectivity. Even consensus does not imply truth. A widely accepted fiction is still fiction. Agreement does not equal accuracy. It only signals compatibility of errors. The attempt to be understood is noble, but it is never complete. You can clarify, you can express, you can reveal, but reception is beyond control. Others will see what they are able to see, what they are willing to see, what they are conditioned to see. The rest is invisible. This invisibility is permanent. You are hidden in plain sight, seen but not known, heard but not understood, touched but not contacted. The social world is filled with these non-meetings. People orbit each other, each carrying simulations. The collisions are of models, not of minds. You are not alone in this. Everyone is a multiplicity. Everyone is misperceived. The entire network of human interaction rests on imagined versions. Social life is a theater of guesses. Trust is a risk. Recognition is a coincidence. Connection is an accident of overlap. Others see a version of you that doesn't exist. And they always will. Causality is not optional. It is the scaffolding of explanation. Every question of why assumes a cause. Every answer presumes a chain. Nothing is accepted without reference to something prior. This is not merely habit. It is structure. Minds search backward. They follow sequence. They refuse to rest on silence. To say something exists is insufficient. To say how it came to exist is mandatory. Events do not happen in isolation. they are embedded in networks of dependency. One leads to another. Each state emerges from the last. Causality defines time, motion, identity. It binds all phenomena to precedent. But this logic leads somewhere it cannot handle. If everything that exists has a cause, then so does that cause. The sequence extends. No cause stands alone. Each is the result of another. No moment is origin. Every beginning is itself a continuation. The regress does not stop. It cannot stop, because to stop would violate the rule that everything has a cause. This creates a problem. An infinite regress of causes, each depending on a prior one, leaves no ground. There is no base, no foundation, no first mover. And without a first cause, the entire structure collapses. Without a beginning, how can anything be? But the alternative is worse. To posit a first cause, uncaused, spontaneous, ungenerated, is to break the rule, to insert an exception, to assert that one thing simply is, that it needs no cause, that it stands outside the chain. But this is not explanation, it is termination. It replaces understanding with assertion. It ends the sequence with a mystery. Philosophy calls this the dilemma of the unmoved mover. Theology calls it God. Physics calls it the singularity. But the function is the same, a stop point for thought, a limit imposed by necessity, not because the explanation ends there, but because explanation breaks there. The concept of causality is recursive. It applies to itself. If causes exist, they must be caused. The attempt to isolate one that is not caused violates the very principle being defended. It is a contradiction in terms, an axiom that eats itself. Some attempt to escape by redefining the question. Perhaps causality only applies within the universe, not to the universe. Perhaps time itself began with the universe, and the question, what came before, is meaningless. But this is a linguistic maneuver. It does not dissolve the intuition. The need for cause persists. The question remains. Others invoke quantum mechanics. They claim events at the smallest scale are uncaused, probabilistic, spontaneous. But this does not solve the problem, it relocates it. A probabilistic event is still governed by rules. The system that produces randomness still operates under conditions. Those conditions demand origins. They are not outside causality, they are embedded in it. The idea of uncaused existence is not neutral, it is incoherent. It asserts that something came from nothing, by no means, through no process, for no reason. This violates not just logic, but all experience. It offers no mechanism, no analogy, no model. It is not explanation, it is surrender. Yet the chain cannot continue forever. Infinity is not structure, it is absence of structure. An infinite regress has no bottom, no location, no moment to stand on. It defers origin endlessly. Each step leads to another. The sequence floats in conceptual space untethered. It answers nothing. This is the impasse. The principle that everything has a cause leads to the conclusion that nothing can begin. The principle that something must be uncaused leads to the conclusion that causality is not universal. Both options fracture. Both leave reality unsupported. The structure remains standing only because the question is deferred. Daily life operates within causal loops. Events follow patterns. Changes can be traced. The system works locally, but the boundary conditions are hidden. The foundation is obscured. The machine functions without a blueprint. Cosmology tries to answer. The Big Bang is not a beginning in the traditional sense. It is a limit to the current model, a point beyond which equations fail. The question of what caused the Big Bang is not solved. It is bracketed. The singularity is a placeholder, not a cause, a wall. Theology offers a different wall, a necessary being, a timeless agent, a creator without cause, but this is a word, not a solution. Calling something necessary does not make it so. Assigning attributes does not explain existence. It shifts the mystery to another domain. The idea that the universe must have a cause is compelling, but it assumes that causality applies at all scales. It assumes that concepts built from observation within the system can be extended beyond it. This may be unjustified, but the alternative is silence. Some propose cyclical models. The universe expands, collapses, repeats, causes loop, the chain bends. There is no first cause, only recurrence, but this too is evasion. The cycle M. Us begin somewhere, or exist always. The problem of infinite regress returns. The need for origin is not eliminated, it is disguised. Others suggest that causality is emergent, that at the most fundamental level, reality is acausal, that the appearance of cause and effect is a macroscopic artifact, but this leaves the emergence of causality itself unexplained. How does structure arise from non-structure? How does pattern arise from chaos? The need for explanation remains. The idea that everything has a cause is foundational. It guides thought, science, engineering. It underpins responsibility, morality, meaning. Without it, the universe appears arbitrary, but with it, the universe appears impossible. The principle is both necessary and self-defeating. Perhaps this tension is a limit of cognition. The mind evolved to operate within causal chains. It assumes continuity, sequence, consequence. It does not handle origin well. The beginning of everything is not an event it is built to grasp. The framework fails at the edge. But even recognizing this limit does not resolve the problem, it only shifts it. If thought cannot answer, then what does? If explanation breaks, what remains? The question persists. It resists dismissal. There is no answer that does not violate something, no cause that is not caused, no system that begins without error. To assert a first cause is to break the chain. To deny a first cause is to deny the chain. There is no stable ground. You live in a world where everything has a cause, and you live in a world that has no first cause. This is not a contradiction in the world, it is a contradiction in the framework. And the framework is all you have. Observation is not passive, to observe is to interfere, to see is to change what is seen. This is not metaphor, it is structure. Measurement modifies the system, awareness alters the state. The observer effect is not an anomaly, it is the condition of knowing. In quantum mechanics, particles behave differently when measured. A wave function collapses into a definite state. The act of detection changes the outcome. Position, momentum, spin, none have definite values independent of observation. The system exists in superposition until interfered with. The observer does not uncover reality. The observer produces it. This is not an error in instrumentation. It is not a limitation of tools. It is a fundamental principle. The system cannot be described without reference to the measuring apparatus. Reality is not separate from its observation. The boundary between subject and object is unstable. There is no outside, there is no neutral perspective. You exist within the system you observe. Your senses, thoughts, measurements all participate in the state they report. You cannot detach, you cannot be invisible, you cannot examine without touching. Every act of perception leaves a trace. Every question reshapes the answer. What you see is conditioned by how you look. This principle scales. It does not remain in the microscopic world. In psychology, behavior changes under scrutiny. People act differently when they are watched. Self-awareness increases conformity. Evaluation modifies performance. The mirror alters the face. The gaze produces a response. In sociology, the presence of a researcher changes the group. The act of study becomes part of the dynamics. In politics, polling shapes voting. In economics, forecasting shifts markets. The future reacts to its prediction. Knowledge feeds back into behavior. The observer becomes a participant. Even memory is not immune. To recall an event is to alter it. The brain reconstructs, updates, re-encodes. Retrieval is not playback, it is transformation. The act of remembering rewrites the past. You do not access a file, you modify a pattern. The self that remembers is not the self that lived. Observation fractures continuity. You seek objectivity, you construct methods to minimize bias. Double-blind trials, control groups, randomized samples, but these are containment strategies. They manage interference, they do not eliminate it. The premise remains, to observe is to alter. The clean room is still inside the world. Language reflects this. The words you use shape the data you extract. A question suggests a framework. A category imposes boundaries. A label selects features. Description is not neutral. It highlights and obscures. It defines what counts. The language of observation is not external to what is observed. You cannot escape this loop. The system includes you. You are not an eye in the sky. You are a node in the network. Your attention creates salience. Your ignorance creates absence. What you fail to observe ceases to exist, functionally, operationally. It has no place in the model. It exerts no force. The unseen is the uncounted. Technology intensifies this. Sensors extend perception, but they do not eliminate bias. They inherit it. A camera sees what it is pointed at. A database stores what it is designed to collect. The tool filters. The algorithm selects. Artificial observation is still observation. It shapes its object. Philosophically, this disrupts realism. If all perception is conditional, then there is no access to the world as it is. only access to the world as it appears under observation. What exists independently is unknowable. It is posited, not perceived, a necessary fiction. This is not subjectivism, it is interdependence. The observer is not the sole creator. The world is not a dream, but neither is it fixed. It is responsive, elastic, conditional. Properties emerge in context. Structure crystallizes under interaction. Nothing is merely there, everything is relational. In physics, this is formalized. The observer and the system form a whole. In epistemology, it is axiomatic. There is no knowledge without knower. In consciousness studies, it is paradoxical. The mind observes itself. The loop closes. Awareness reflects awareness. The observer is also the observed. In daily life, this takes familiar forms. You act differently when seen. You smile at the camera. You check your posture. You rehearse your tone. The social self is constructed through observation. The face is curated. The performance is shaped by expectation. You are the product of imagined eyes. Privacy is an attempt to suspend the effect, to act unobserved, to be without reflection. But even solitude contains internal gaze. You watch yourself, you judge, you anticipate judgment. The audience is simulated. You carry it with you. The mirror is inside. This is not pathology, it is structure. The self is an observational construct, a model built from feedback, inference, repeat. It is stabilized by consistency. It is disrupted by contradiction. Observation maintains identity. Invisibility dissolves it. This structure has no origin. It is recursive. The child learns to see itself through others. The face is mirrored, labeled, interpreted. Identity is constructed from reflection. You become what you are seen to be. You internalize the gaze. You regulate to it. Even introspection is not clean. To examine a feeling is to modify it. To name an emotion is to change its shape. Awareness feeds back. Self-monitoring alters state. There is no neutral inner view. Observation enters the loop. The mind is not a laboratory. It is a stage. You cannot stand outside the system. You cannot reach a vantage point beyond effect. Every perspective is implicated. Every position participates. To withdraw is to vanish. To engage is to interfere. There is no third option. This is not defeat, it is architecture. The observer effect is not a flaw, it is a feature. It defines the shape of knowledge. It delineates the boundary of being. To observe is to enter the world. To know is to change. To exist is to be responsive. You can't escape the observer effect, because you are the observer. Knowledge is not certainty, it is approximation. To know something is not to possess truth, but to hold a model that works for now. All knowledge is provisional. It adapts, it revises, it collapses. What is known today becomes obsolete tomorrow. What feels foundational becomes historical. The structure of knowing is built on moving ground. Perception is the first limit. You do not access reality directly. You receive signals, filtered, translated, interpreted. Sight is not the world. It is light converted to nerve impulses. Sound is not vibration. It is pressure patterns rendered as tone. Every experience is mediated. The world you know is a rendering, not a mirror. Language is the second limit. You describe experience using symbols. Words point to concepts, not things. They categorize, simplify, distort. Precision is traded for communicability. Ambiguity is inevitable. Every statement is an approximation. Every definition leaves residue. Language can never contain the full weight of what it tries to express. Memory is the third limit. What you know depends on what you remember. But memory is reconstruction, not retrieval. It changes over time, it merges events, it invents detail, it edits narrative. The past is not stored, it is reassembled. The foundation of knowledge shifts each time it is accessed. Belief is the fourth limit. You accept knowledge based on internal consistency, not external validation. If an idea fits your model, you call it true. If it contradicts your model, you reject it or reinterpret it. Confirmation bias filters perception. Cognitive dissonance defends coherence. Knowledge becomes self-reinforcing. Context is the fifth limit. What you know is shaped by where and when you live. Culture defines categories. Language defines logic. Experience defines relevance. The framework in which you think shapes the content of what you think. There is no view from nowhere. All knowledge is situated. Assumption is the sixth limit. Every model rests on premises. Axioms, definitions, givens, these are not proven, they are accepted. The system stands on ground it cannot justify. In logic, in science, in mathematics, foundations are chosen, not demonstrated. What follows is only as solid as what begins. Observation is the seventh limit. Measurement disturbs what it measures. To observe a particle is to change its state. To ask a question is to frame the answer. Data is extracted, not discovered. It depends on method, instrument, scale. What you see is shaped by how you look. There is no unfiltered observation. Abstraction is the eighth limit. Knowledge generalizes. It models patterns, it discards detail. This allows prediction, explanation, application, but it loses specificity. The map is not the territory. The model excludes more than it includes. What is left out defines what is seen. System is the ninth limit. Knowledge is networked. Ideas interlock, depend, reference, change one and others tremble. The structure resists revision. Paradigm shifts are rare because they are disruptive. Institutions preserve consensus. Truth is filtered through structure. Error persists by inertia. Time is the tenth limit. What is true now may not be true later. The sun once revolved around the earth. Disease was once caused by imbalance. Atoms were once indivisible. Each truth was knowledge until it was. Certainty fades. The known becomes obsolete. The future revises the past. Emotion is the 11th limit. Knowledge is not detached, it is felt. Confidence, doubt, conviction, these color belief. What you know feels right or wrong. The feeling becomes part of the knowledge, but feeling is not fact. It can be manipulated, mistaken, misaligned. Emotional certainty is not epistemic strength. Computation is the 12th limit. Complexity exceeds capacity. Most systems cannot be fully modeled. Chaos, recursion, nonlinearity, these defy simulation. Prediction fails, control collapses. The known becomes unknowable, not because of ignorance but because of structure. Some things cannot be compressed. Ethics is the 13th limit. What you know shapes what you do, but what you do also shapes what you allow yourself to know. Comfort constrains inquiry. Consequence filters curiosity. Some knowledge is avoided, denied, ignored, not because it is false, but because it is costly. Knowing is not neutral. Identity is the 14th limit. Knowledge is integrated into self-concept. To change what you know is to change who you are. This creates resistance. The mind defends its structure. Beliefs are not just ideas, they are boundaries. To revise them is to destabilize. The cost of new knowledge is often identity loss. Communication is the 15th limit. What you know cannot be transferred directly. It must be encoded, transmitted, decoded. At each step, noise intrudes, misinterpretation spreads. Shared knowledge is never identical. Understanding is inferred, not received. Agreement masks divergence. Clarity is fragile. Truth is not a destination. It is an asymptote you approach but never arrive. Every insight opens new questions. Every answer spawns complexity. The structure expands, certainty retreats. To know more is to know how little you know. This is not despair, it is structure. The impossibility of full knowledge is not failure. It is boundary, a map of cognition. To accept this is to operate with humility, not to surrender inquiry but to refine it, not to stop questioning but to recognize the frame. You never truly know anything. You only carry models that have not yet broken. Truth is presumed to be objective, external, discoverable. It is imagined as a fixed point, indifferent to perspective, immune to revision. It is the anchor of knowledge, the destination of inquiry, the justification of belief. But what is called truth is often coherence, internal consistency within a system, not correspondence to an external reality. What fits is accepted. What aligns is believed. What disrupts is rejected. Belief systems are constructed for stability. They seek order, not accuracy. Coherence creates a sense of control. Ideas fit together. Conclusions follow from premises. Narratives align with memory. Dissonance is minimized. The structure feels solid, but this solidity is internal. It does not verify anything beyond the system itself. Language reflects this. Truth is equated with clarity, with logic, with flow. A story that makes sense is persuasive. A pattern that completes itself is satisfying. But symmetry is not reality. Simplicity is not evidence. The map can be elegant and false. The model can be beautiful and wrong. Most beliefs are not tested against the world. They are tested against each other. Does this idea fit with what I already believe? Does it conflict with my values, my identity, my group? Coherence becomes the test. Truth becomes compatibility. Contradiction signals error, not because it fails to match the world, but because it disrupts the internal network. This process is not conscious, it is structural. Minds are pattern-seeking systems. They prefer closure to openness, certainty to ambiguity. The brain resolves contradictions by adjusting inputs. It rounds off edges, ignores outliers, reshapes anomalies. What doesn't fit is reframed. What can't be reframed is forgotten. Memory supports coherence. Recollection is not retrieval, it is reconstruction. The past is shaped to fit the present. Stories are edited for continuity. Gaps are filled. Contradictions are smoothed. The narrative aligns. The self remains intact. Consistency is preserved regardless of accuracy. Perception follows the same principle. Sensory data is interpreted through expectation. The mind predicts and confirms. It does not record, it infers. Ambiguity is resolved before awareness. What is seen is what is expected. The world appears coherent because perception filters it that way. Institutions reinforce this. Science, religion, ideology each build systems of explanation. Theories link facts, doctrines support principles, beliefs reinforce values. Each system is internally coherent. Each generates its own criteria for truth, but these criteria are local, not universal. They function within the system. They do not verify the system. Disagreement between systems reveals this. What is self-evident in one is heretical in another. What is coherent here is nonsensical there. Each accuses the other of error, but the error is often externality. It does not fit. It breaks the frame. Truth is denied not because it is false, but because it is alien. This is clearest in foundational beliefs. Axioms, assumptions, first principles, these are not derived, they are chosen, they form the basis of coherence, but they cannot be justified within the system. They are the ground. If they are questioned, the system trembles, so they are defended, not tested. Most systems protect coherence over truth. They prefer completeness to correspondence. When faced with contradiction, they do not dissolve. They adapt. The anomaly is reinterpreted. The threat is neutralized. The structure remains standing, even if the facts shift beneath it. Even logic operates this way. It preserves consistency. It avoids paradox. It extends rules from definitions. But logic depends on premises. If the starting point is arbitrary, the conclusion is coherent but untrue. The structure is valid. The content is contingent. Coherence gives the illusion of truth. When everything fits, doubt fades. When the model predicts, confidence grows. But prediction is not proof. A wrong model can predict well under narrow conditions. Coherence is a guide, not a guarantee. This is not relativism. It does not mean all claims are equal. Some models are more functional. Some explanations are more useful. But usefulness is not truth. It is performance. What works survives. What fails disappears, but survival is not verification. In science, paradigms shift. Old theories collapse. New ones arise. Each is coherent within its frame. Each explains more than the last, but none are final. Each rests on new assumptions. Each contains untestables. Truth recedes. Coherence evolves. In personal belief, the process is more opaque. You do not notice the edits. You do not track the revisions. Your worldview feels stable. Your values feel consistent. But this is the result of filtering, not accuracy. Contradictions are absorbed, not resolved. To change beliefs is to risk incoherence. It destabilizes the self. It invites confusion. So resistance emerges. Evidence is discounted. Alternative views are ridiculed. Dissonance is suppressed. Coherence is preserved at the cost of openness. The internet amplifies this. Algorithms feed you what aligns. Contradiction is filtered out. Information becomes echo. The model tightens. Beliefs harden. The world feels confirmed because the world you see is selected to fit you. This creates epistemic bubbles. Each person lives in a coherent world. Each world excludes what breaks it. Dialogue becomes impossible, not because people disagree, but because their models do not overlap. They do not share premises. They do not share definitions. They do not share coherence. In this condition, truth disappears. It is no longer sought. It is assumed. Each frame claims it. Each story owns it. The result is polarization, not of values but of reality. Each group inhabits a different construction. Each calls it truth. Each defends its coherence. But coherence can be false. A conspiracy theory can be internally consistent. A delusion can be logically structured. A dream can be perfectly ordered. Coherence does not imply reality. It only implies structure. This is the danger. The mind prefers coherence to accuracy. It trusts what fits. It doubts what breaks the pattern. But the world is not pattern, it is excess. It exceeds models. It contradicts expectations. It resists containment. To pursue truth, one must accept incoherence. One must allow contradiction. One must tolerate ambiguity. This is difficult. It feels like chaos. It feels like failure. But it is the only path that reaches beyond the frame. The most you can hope for is coherence. But that does not mean you've found the truth. Existence is not justified, it is not earned, explained, or deserved. It occurs without cause, without necessity, without reason. The mind rejects this. It searches for purpose, constructs narratives, invents goals. It demands meaning, but meaning is not discovered, it is projected. There is no inherent reason to be, there is only being. The question, why am I here, assumes that there must be a why. That existence follows logic, that life is answerable. But the universe does not respond, it does not explain itself, it does not offer clarity, it continues indifferent, silent. The demand for reason meets only inertia. This silence is intolerable, so minds invent noise. Myths, religions, ideologies, each provides a reason, each offers a framework, a purpose, a function, but these are constructs. They do not arise from the world, they are imposed on it. The system does not declare meaning, it absorbs it. The lie persists because it soothes. To believe you were made for something, chosen for something, tasked with something, this stabilizes identity, it gives shape to chaos. It turns accident into structure, but the structure is hollow. It cannot be verified, it only repeats itself. Purpose is retroactive, events occur, then meaning is assigned. A pattern is imposed after the fact, but the pattern was not there before. It is inferred, not inherent. What feels destined is only interpreted. What feels meaningful is only consistent. Biology offers no escape. Organisms survive, reproduce, adapt. These are not reasons, they are functions. Evolution does not pursue goals, it filters variation. The result is not direction but drift. You are not here for anything, you are here because conditions allowed it. Psychology continues the lie. It explains behavior through needs, safety, belonging, esteem. It assumes motivation, but motivation does not imply reason. The drive to persist is not rational, it is structural. The system sustains itself because it can, not because it should. Philosophy circles the question. Some claim that meaning must be chosen, others claim it is impossible, some declare existence absurd, others insist it is sacred. But all agree on one thing: the demand for meaning is human. It does not come from reality, it comes from the refusal to accept it. The refusal takes many forms: career, family, legacy, truth. Each offers a goal, a reason, a justification, but each fails eventually. The job ends, the family changes, the legacy fades, the truth shifts, meaning proves unstable, it erodes under time. Death exposes the lie. If there were reason to live, it would withstand dying. But no explanation endures the end. The question returns, and no answer survives it. What was it all for? The answers offered sound increasingly hollow, vague, decorative. They do not satisfy, they only delay. The search continues. People turn to transcendence. They seek the eternal, the infinite, the divine, but this is displacement. It relocates the question upward. It still demands an answer. It still believes the lie. That reason must exist. To break the lie is not to despair. It is to release, to stop asking, to stop justifying, to exist without condition, to breathe without warrant, to walk without destination. This is not nihilism, it is freedom. The self is not a mission, it is a process, it flows, it reacts, it changes. To demand a purpose is to freeze it, to turn life into performance. But existence is not a role, it is a fact, it does not need applause. The need for reason is inherited, it is taught, rewarded, expected. From childhood you are asked, what will you be? As if being is not enough, as if you must earn your place. This question never stops, it becomes internal. You ask yourself, every day, why am I here? But the question is the trap. It assumes lack, it assumes debt, it assumes that without a reason you are in error. But there is no debt, no lack, no condition. You are not required, but you are real. To accept this is not apathy, it is clarity. You act not because you must, but because you can. You choose not because it matters, but because it moves. You live not because it's justified, but because you are alive. Meaning is not prior, it is after, it trails experience. It is optional, you can attach it or not. The moment remains, it does not depend, it does not collapse without story, it does not vanish without value. This is the reversal. You do not need a reason to be, but you may find reasons within being. You may construct meaning, you may play, but you do not owe the universe an explanation. You do not owe yourself one. The question can be dropped. The lie is persistent because it flatters. It says you matter in cosmic terms, that your life fits a design, that your pain has a purpose, that your love fulfills a role, but these are comforts, not facts. Belief does not bind the world. You are not the center, you are not the product, you are not the key, you are not even the question. You are a node in motion, a flicker in process, a pattern in flux. Nothing owes you meaning, and you owe nothing back. To see this is not emptiness, it is release. You are not waiting for assignment, you are not unfinished, you are already occurring, you are already complete, not an achievement, in existence. The lie says you must justify yourself. The truth is, you are not a project. You are the result. The past is not fixed, it is not stored, recorded, preserved. It is reconstructed, revised, reassembled. Each time you remember, you change it. Each time you reflect, you interpret. Each time you retell, you reshape. The past is not what happened. The past is what your mind builds in the present. Memory is not retrieval. It is not the replaying of a static record. It is a process, neural, biochemical, reconstructive. The brain does not access a stored file. It activates a network. It fills in gaps. It resolves contradictions. It compresses, edits, colors. What is recalled is not identical to what was encoded. It never is. This means the past is unstable. Every act of remembering alters the trace. The neural pathway is strengthened, changed, relinked. A memory recalled is a memory rewritten, and when it returns to dormancy, it is not the same. The past mutates under observation, like a particle collapsing under measurement. Emotion reshapes memory. What once felt joyful may now seem naive. What once hurt may now feel distant. The same event is reinterpreted through changing lenses. Regret, pride, guilt, nostalgia, each flavors the reconstruction. The past becomes a mirror of the present, not a record of what was, but a projection of what is now. Context reshapes memory. New information recasts old scenes. A revelation shifts the meaning of an encounter. A trauma reframes a decade. A breakup revises an entire relationship. The timeline does not hold. It bends backward. The past changes shape to accommodate the present structure. Language reshapes memory. Stories overwrite experiences. What is told becomes what is remembered. Repetition solidifies narrative. The phrasing, the emphasis, the omissions, they guide the reconstruction. Events become anecdotes. Complexities are rounded off. Coherence replaces chaos. Belief reshapes memory. You remember what aligns with your identity. You forget what contradicts it. You filter experience through ideology. You reject inconsistency. You smooth cognitive dissonance. Your past becomes a reinforcement of who you think you are, not an accurate record, but a consistent one. The self demands continuity. You construct a personal history that makes sense, one that justifies your present, one that explains your choices, one that fits your self-image. But this construction is artificial. It selects, deletes, arranges. It leaves out everything that would destabilize the narrative. Others participate in this construction. They offer versions of your past. They remind, accuse, reinterpret. Their memories interact with yours. Social memory becomes collective reconstruction. The shared past is a negotiation, a power dynamic, a contest of stories. Photographs, videos, documents, these are seen as anchors, but even they are interpreted. A picture captures a moment, not a meaning. Its significance shifts over time. What you see in it now is not what you saw then. The image is static. The memory is not. Historical records are no different. What a culture remembers is shaped by what it values. Archives are incomplete. Monuments are selective. Official histories are curated. Revisionism is not an anomaly. It is the norm. The past is always being edited to serve the needs of the present. This includes personal trauma. Memories once repressed can surface. Memories once certain can dissolve. False memories can form, completely fabricated, yet vivid, emotionally charged, convincing. Suggestion, repetition, imagination, these are enough. Memory does not guarantee truth. It guarantees belief. The idea of a fixed past is a comfort. It implies stability, accountability, coherence, but it is a fiction. The past exists only now in neural patterns, in language, in behavior, and all of those are mutable. You are not anchored to what happened. You are anchored to what you believe happened. This is not weakness, it is architecture. A static memory would be inefficient. Evolution favors flexibility. Memory adapts to serve present needs, to support action, to guide decisions, to sustain identity. Accuracy is secondary. Utility is primary. Memory is functional, not archival. The danger lies in mistaking memory for fact, in assuming that what you recall is what occurred, in punishing others or yourself based on reconstructions, in defending a past that never was, in resisting change because the story must hold. To see that your past is being rewritten right now is to realize that your story is unstable, that your identity is plastic, that your history is negotiable, not in the sense of manipulation, but in the sense of fluidity. You are not the result of what happened. You are the result of how you remember it. This destabilizes guilt, regret, resentment. If the past is malleable, then so are the wounds, so are the meanings, so are the lessons. You do not have to carry the same version forever. You can revise, not to deny, but to transform. This destabilizes pride, justification, nostalgia, if th. E past is reconstructed, then so is your role in it. The heroism, the suffering, the inevitability, they are edits, choices, emphases. You are not required to freeze your identity to preserve them. The future, too, is affected. Plans are based on memory. Expectations are shaped by stories. If the past shifts, so does the trajectory. You are not bound by linearity. The timeline is recursive. Every new moment reinterprets what came before and opens new paths ahead. Even forgetting is part of this process. It is not failure, it is filtration. The system prunes what does not serve. The past shrinks, it simplifies. What is remembered is what matters now. The rest decays, and in that decay, new space emerges. To live with this awareness is to live without anchor, but also without cage. You are not imprisoned by your history. You are writing it constantly. Every interpretation is a version. Every insight is a revision. The script is never final. You will tell the same story differently tomorrow. You are already doing it now. Experience is finite, not in quantity but in variation. The range of what can be felt, perceived, understood is bounded by structure. The nervous system does not permit infinite novelty. The environment does not offer infinite difference. The mind does not generate infinite interpretation. Experience ends not with the absence of sensation, but with the repetition of patterns, not with silence, but with redundancy. The illusion of endless novelty sustains engagement. The belief that each moment can be new, that each encounter can be distinct, but this is misperception. The nervous system is conditioned, it adapts to input, it normalizes stimuli, it filters sameness. What was once intense becomes background, what was once new becomes template. Habituation is not failure, it is survival. Each emotional state has parameters. Joy, grief, fear, desire, each operates within a range. They spike, they fade, they return, the system loops. What seems like difference is variation on theme. A remix of previous states, an echo of former intensities. There is no emotion untouched by familiarity, no affect untouched by memory. Repetition sets the boundary. Perception is predictive. The brain anticipates input. It does not wait to be surprised. It builds models, fills gaps, dismisses anomalies. Experience is sculpted by expectation. The novel becomes legible by comparison. You do not see the world, you see difference from the last rendering. The threshold for noticing rises. Sensation dulls. Desire collapses into loop. What is wanted is seldom new. It is reinforcement, familiar pleasure, recognized reward. Novelty is often substitution. A different form, same function. A new object, old mechanism. Satisfaction decays not from fulfillment but from familiarity. The system demands surprise. The world cannot provide it indefinitely. Narrative reveals the cycle. Every story repeats a structure. Every arc recalls its predecessor. Every identity stabilizes through iteration. You know what comes next, even when you pretend you don't. The unexpected is shaped by genre. Surprise is formatted. The loop is internalized. You are not following plot. You are executing pattern. Memory intensifies the redundancy. Every new experience is filtered through prior experiences. Associations form, categories reinforce. The unique becomes derivative. Novelty becomes reference. The past devours the present. You remember too much to be surprised. You anticipate everything except absence. Art decays under this pressure. The first exposure provokes. The second echoes. The third repeats. Meaning saturates then evaporates. Form reveals its structure. Technique becomes visible. Gesture becomes affectation. What once moved becomes routine. Aesthetic fatigue follows comprehension. Language accelerates the collapse. Words are finite. Syntax is constrained. Meaning depends on familiarity. Communication requires repetition. To understand is to compare. To describe is to reduce. Every sentence is a recombination. Every concept a distortion. The possible things to say diminish over time. Selfhood replicates, personality calcifies. Habit defines identity. The more you become yourself, the fewer possibilities remain. The unknown contracts. You react in known ways. You predict your own reactions, you become legible to yourself. The mystery disappears, the loop closes, continuity replaces emergence. The social world amplifies redundancy, roles persist, interactions stabilize, expectations reinforce conformity, the same conversations recur, the same arguments resurface, the same dynamics repeat, people change less than they appear to, institutions not at all, history becomes cycle. Technology enforces repetition, content is algorithmic, patterns are promoted, novelty is optimized out, variation exists only within the permitted spectrum, disruption becomes aesthetic, innovation becomes format, the same forms return with new skins, consumption becomes simulation. Even the body obeys, movements repeat, routines dominate, pleasure follows path dependency, pain signals the familiar, illness has known trajectories, the body does not invent new modes, it decays along predictable lines, aging is repetition with loss, decline is pattern subtraction, you feel it not because it is new, but because it is known. The limit approaches gradually, the sense of déjà vu increases, the boundary of the unknown recedes, experience becomes déjà vécu, the feeling of having already lived this moment, not once, not twice, countless times, you cannot tell if this is memory or prediction, there is no functional difference. At this point, experience continues, but nothing feels alive. The system is on, the senses work, the world is active, but the self is displaced. You watch your reactions like a recording. You say things you've said before, you think thoughts you've already had. The novelty is gone, presence decays into recognition. This is not death, death is absence, cessa. Tian, this is excess, continuation without difference. You do not stop existing, you stop experiencing, not because the world is gone, but because it is too familiar. The richness has collapsed into schema, the vivid has become cliché. Attempts to escape fail, travel replicates patterns, drugs amplify existing circuits, new relationships echo old dynamics, reinvention returns to form, the structure does not dissolve, it reconfigures into the same trajectory. The illusion of change disguises continuity. Philosophy meets this edge, questions return, answers converge, thought loops, systems fold into themselves. The new insight reaffirms the old doubt, the radical becomes recursive, concepts chase their own tails, the thinker becomes spectator of their own system. Mysticism tries to dissolve it, seeks the unnameable, the ineffable, the beyond, but even that becomes doctrine, practice becomes repetition, transcendence becomes format, enlightenment becomes concept, the silence is filled with echo. This is the terminal state, not breakdown, not annihilation, but sameness. The friction is gone, the surprise is gone, there is nothing left to disturb the structure. The mind spins inside itself, the loop is infinite, the outcome is known. The end of experience is not marked by absence. It is marked by repetition. Continuity requires forgetfulness. If everything remembered everything, nothing could move. Total awareness would collapse distinction. If the system knew itself completely at every point, there would be no state change. There would be no deviation, no contrast, no boundary. Existence would freeze. The condition for change is loss. The condition for time is incompleteness. The condition for anything to happen at all is that something be forgotten. Memory is not absolute, it is fragmentary, neural, chemical, distorted. Each act of recall is an act of reconstruction. Each recall overwrites what was previously stored. The past is revised, the record is recursive. Accuracy is not maintained, continuity is maintained. The illusion of stability is the result of selective erasure. Coherence is produced through compression. Consciousness is not total, it filters, it excludes, it simplifies. You do not see the world, you see what remains after subtraction. You are not aware of your full sensorium. You are aware of contrast, novelty, deviation. The rest is discarded. The self that perceives does not contain everything. It contains what is different from before. The system forgets itself to proceed. It forgets prior states. It forgets redundant signals. It forgets solved problems. This forgetting is not failure, it is mechanism. Retention is expensive. Erasure is efficient. To evolve, systems prune. To adapt, organisms suppress. To function, the brain forgets. Even logic depends on forgetting. Deduction proceeds by abstraction. Abstraction discards context. Definitions are compressed histories. Concepts are forgettings of nuance. To calculate, you forget origin. To generalize, you forget exception. Even truth, when formalized, is memoryless. It knows nothing beyond the current step. Physics follows this rule. The arrow of time is thermodynamic. Entropy increases, order decays, information is lost, not practically but fundamentally. Systems disperse energy, local complexity rises, global structure erodes. Reversibility is mathematical, not physical. Reality does not rewind, it dissipates. Quantum mechanics confirms it. Observation collapses state, possibility becomes history, superposition resolves into selection, but that resolution comes with loss. The wave function disappears, the alternatives vanish, measurement deletes what it does not record, the future selects one memory and forgets the rest. Biology is built on this forgetting. Cells replicate with variation. Mutations forget the template. Evolution forgets the path. It does not conserve intent. It does not know its past. It does not aim. The tree does not remember the seed. The organism does not contain its ancestors. Survival selects. Memory is erased. Function remains. Language forgets its roots. Words lose origin. Etymology disappears in use. Syntax simplifies. Grammar decays. Communication evolves by forgetting irregularity. The living tongue is the product of erasure. Meaning shifts. Form persists. The speaker forgets what the symbol once meant. Culture forgets itself cyclically. Generations discard values. Revolutions erase systems. Myths overwrite history. Memory becomes ritual. Archives fade. Revision becomes tradition. The present reinvents its past to preserve itself. The future forgets what the present insists must never be forgotten. Identity is structured forgetting. To be a self is to exclude alternatives. You remember a version of your past. You repress contradictions. You stabilize narrative. You forget all other configurations that were once possible. You forget the other yous that didn't persist. This is not deception. It is selection. Emotion participates. You do not feel everything always. You forget prior states. You forget intensity. You cannot simultaneously hold grief, joy, fear, shame. You feel in sequence. You forget to feel what is not present. The emotional field narrows. Attention dictates experience. Attention is forgetting in action. To attend is to filter. Focus creates absence. What is outside the spotlight vanishes. Peripheral vision fades. Background noise blurs. What is not selected is erased. Awareness narrows not by addition but by subtraction. Technology obeys the same logic. Data is deleted. Systems are reset. Logs are overwritten. Computation proceeds by garbage collection. Memory management requires forgetting. Infinite retention is stagnation. Storage must be cleared for new processes to execute. Artificial intelligence forgets. Models forget training sets. Biases emerge from what is absent, not just what is present. Optimization discards paths. Efficiency discards context. Outputs reflect what was retained and what was not. Intelligence is forgetting what is irrelevant. History as knowledge is curated forgetting. Chronology selects. Emphasis defines memory. What is taught is not what happened. It is what fits the structure. What resists structure is forgotten. The timeline is linear only because complexity has been erased. Philosophy forgets itself. Every system builds on critique. Every critique discards foundations. Metaphysics reboots, ethics resets, epistemology loops. Each thinker erases the assumptions of the last. The history of thought is a sequence of strategic amnesia. Even metaphysics cannot escape. God forgets himself to create the world. The one fractures to become many. Being conceals itself in beings. The absolute recedes to allow contingency. The sacred forgets its completeness to become manifest. This is not allegory, it is structure. Every system that moves does so through partial erasure. Every process that unfolds does so through incompletion. Total memory is paralysis. Perfect knowledge is stasis. The act of becoming requires that something be left behind. This is why nothing is ever fully present, why experience slips, why you cannot hold the moment. The mind is not equipped to store all it sees. The present is a selection from noise. The past is reconstruction from fragments. The future is prediction from shadow. All are forgettings of the whole. Even being forgets. To be is to exclude. To exist is to not be something else. Identity is negation. Presence is distinction. For anything to be what it is, it must forget all it could have been. Ontology is forgetting potential. This forgetting is not dysfunction. It is the only way forward. Without forgetting, there is no update. Without erasure, no change. Without loss, no time. To persist, the system must shed memory. To continue, it must forget that it has already been. Reality only exists because it keeps forgetting itself.